Welcome, traveller. Tonight, we journey into the deep past of our own home, Earth, to an age veiled in mist and memory, more than 400 million years ago. Imagine a world before green, a canvas vast and empty. The continents then were bare, their surfaces sculpted by unseen winds, stark and silent under a sun that might have felt a blazing red. No towering forests, no swaying fields of grass. Not even the softest cushion of moss clung to the stone. For hundreds of millions of years, this was a world of rock and silent expanse. Life in its earliest, timid forms remained bound to the oceans, as if the saltwater cradle was its only sanctuary, and the land, a frontier too harsh, too dry, too utterly empty. But then, as if stirred by an ancient dream, everything began to shift. At first, the change was almost imperceptible, a fragile whisper, easily overlooked. Yet, it was a transformation so profound, so utterly fundamental, that it would rewrite the very history of our planet, setting the stage for every living thing that followed. This was the Silurian Period, a chapter often forgotten, where life found an extraordinary courage. It dared to leave the boundless security of the water, to risk the biting dryness of the land, and to begin a journey toward a future that would, in time, give birth to the first tender soils, the first mighty forests, the first crawling animals, and eventually to the inheritors of that ancient courage. But as we drift into this epoch, haunting questions linger in the cosmic dust. How did a desolate Earth first awaken to the vibrant hue of green? How did these delicate, seemingly fragile plant forms learn to conquer the unforgiving dryness of the land? And what strange, armored titans ruled the ancient seas while the continents lay bare and waiting? Tonight, we will step softly into this quiet revolution. We will wander through alien seas, feeling the ancient currents, and watch in our mind's eye the first tentative roots begin to crack the stone. We will uncover how this overlooked age, a mere breath in geological time, shaped the intricate living world we know today, a world humming with life because of those distant beginnings. As we begin to settle into this journey, one might wonder, where in the vast tapestry of our spinning world are you listening from? And what time does the cosmic clock reveal there? It is always a fascinating thought, to imagine these stories unfolding beneath so many different skies, uniting us across continents and through the silent hours of the night. If these gentle voyages into Earth's distant past bring you a sense of calm and wonder, please consider leaving a soft trace of your appreciation with a like, and perhaps joining our growing community by subscribing to the channel. A warm, silent thank you extends to all of you who are already part of this journey. Your presence helps this little corner of the internet grow, weaving new threads into our shared exploration of deep time. May this story soothe your mind, gently easing you toward a deep and restorative. Now take a deep, calming breath, and let us step softly, as if through a dream, into the forgotten revolution that painted Earth green and made our world truly alive. More than 440 million years ago, a profound tremor shook the very fabric of ancient Earth. It was the twilight of the Ordovician period, and life, primarily nestled within the vast, nurturing oceans, was about to endure a catastrophe of staggering proportions, an event so devastating that it would erase nearly 9 out of every 10 marine species, leaving the seas strangely hollow, as if the ocean itself had taken a long, mournful breath. Entire lineages, which had flourished for millions upon millions of years, vanished with an abrupt finality, their long histories brought to a silent close. The seas, once teeming with the intricate dance of trilobites, the gentle sway of brachiopods, and countless other invertebrates, were left with an eerie emptiness, a stark testament to nature's powerful, sometimes ruthless. This great extinction did not arrive in a single cataclysmic strike, but unfolded in waves, a slow, inexorable process driven by a planet caught in a dramatic cycle of profound change. At first, the world slipped into a deep, chilling embrace of ice. Vast glaciers, like silent, sprawling giants, crept across the southern supercontinent of Gondwana, which at that ancient time lay shrouded over the South Pole. As the ice tightened its grip, enormous volumes of water were locked away, imprisoned within these frozen expanses, causing global sea levels to fall sharply, receding like a forgotten tide. Shallow seas, once vibrant nurseries of life, drained away, exposing delicate coral reefs and intricate coastal ecosystems to the harsh, unwelcoming air. Countless species, perfectly adapted to warm, stable waters, found themselves stranded, bewildered in a new world of biting cold and scarcity. As the grip of the Ice Age intensified, temperatures plunged further. Oceanic currents, those invisible rivers of the sea, shifted their ancient paths, and the very chemistry of the water began to subtly, yet fundamentally, alter. Marine habitats, once vibrant landscapes supporting thriving ecosystems, became inhospitable, alien realms. Creatures that had endured for tens of millions of years, masters of their time, simply could not adapt quickly enough to this rapid, planetary upheaval. Then, as if the planet had reached its coldest, most desperate point, the great pendulum of Earth's climate swung dramatically in the other direction. The colossal ice sheets began their slow, mournful melt. Glaciers receded, sighing back into the oceans, and the sea returned firmed. The land, but it was not the same sea. The melting ice released immense floods of fresh water, disrupting the delicate balance of salinity and oxygen levels in the oceans. Simultaneously, deep within the Earth, volcanic activity surged, sending vast plumes of greenhouse gases into the ancient skies, tipping the planet into a sudden, often violent, warm. Shallow seas once again spread across the continents, reclaiming the land, but now their waters were unstable, unusually warm, and riddled with chemical imbalances. Life that had managed to survive the harrowing cold was struck again, this time by the scorching heat. For many species, it was a second and utterly final blow. In this profound and relentless way, the Ordovician extinction reshaped the very soul of Earth. The oceans were no longer dominated by the same familiar creatures, and ecosystems that had seemed eternal, as old as time itself, were gone. Yet, one might ponder, mass extinctions are not merely endings. They are, in their own silent way, profound beginnings. They clear the grand stage of life, leaving behind vast vacant spaces, echoing with possibility, for new forms of life to enter and experiment. And it is precisely from this emptied stage that the Silurian story truly, tentatively begins. When the relentless waves of extinction had finally run their course, the continents stood bare, almost utterly lifeless, like vast, forgotten canvases awaiting their first strokes of colour. Imagine, for a moment, immense tracts of land exposed fully to the raw elements, nothing to break the monotonous expanse of rock and dust. Winds, ancient and ceaseless, scoured the surfaces, carrying fine grains across empty, silent plains. There were no roots, no delicate tendrils to hold the nascent soil in place, no comforting greenery to soften the harsh, stark lines of the primeval landscape. The land was silent, yes, but it was a silence charged with anticipation, a profound stillness that was not the silence of permanence, but rather the deep, indrawn breath after a catastrophe, a pregnant pause between chapters of an unfolding cosmic epic. The oceans, though depleted and scarred, still held the resilient seeds of recovery, the promise of renewal, and the continents, stripped bare and empty, offered new opportunities, vast open spaces that had never existed before. For the first time in Earth's long, evolving history, there was a vast, silent space for organisms to attempt something truly bold, to stretch beyond the comforting embrace of the water and onto the formidable, dry land itself. The world at the dawn of the Silurian was, therefore, a realm of stark and beautiful contrasts. The memory of devastation was fresh, a lingering echo in the silent seas, but so too was the potent potential for renewal, a faint, nascent hum of life stirring beneath the surface. The oceans, having been drained and refilled, were ready, patiently waiting to host new forms of life, to cradle the next chapter of marine evolution. The continents, which had been barren for so long, stood ripe for their first grand experiment in greening, a quiet revolution waiting to unfold, and the climate, though still prone to dramatic swings, was settling, almost sighing into a warmer, more stable rhythm, a gentle cadence that would allow recovery to take root, both in the deep blue seas and on the newly exposed, silent lands. From this emptied stage, the Silurian would quietly emerge, carrying with it the fragile, almost invisible beginnings of future forests, the rise of new, formidable predators in the ancient seas, and the slow, steady, yet utterly profound transformation of Earth's very surface. It was in this world of profound loss and burgeoning opportunity that life would, with quiet determination, find its next, extraordinary path forward. The Silurian world, like a vast, ancient mosaic, was shaped by the slow, inexorable dance of shifting continents. At this time, Earth's land masses were far smaller, more fragmented than the colossal continents we recognize today, scattered pieces drifting like forgotten dreams across an oceanic planet. Laurentia, the ancient heart that would one day form the core of North America, reclined closer to the equator, bathed in a perpetual, gentle warmth and nascent paradise. To its east lay Baltica, the venerable foundation of much of northern Europe, and Avalonia, a smaller, more enigmatic fragment that would later become parts of the British Isles and eastern North America. During the Silurian, these three drifting blocks of land began their slow, majestic convergence, an ancient geological ballet. Their colossal collisions, unfolding over eons, pushed the Earth's crust upward, raising embryonic mountain ranges in the process. Though these nascent mountains were not yet the towering giants like the later Himalayas, their slow, steady uplift was a powerful sign of the planet reshaping itself from within, a deep inner stirring. As the continents inched together, much of their surfaces remained gently drowned beneath shallow, sun-dappled seas. Vast stretches of the land were submerged beneath warm, luminous waters that reached only a few tens of meters deep. Like a cosmic breath held for millions of years, these tranquil seas lapped across wide, expansive continental shelves, creating coastlines that were never truly fixed, but constantly shifting, breathing in and out as sea levels subtly rose and fell. For life, these shallow, sunlit waters were incredibly fertile ground, veritable nurseries of biodiversity. Sunlight, a golden elixir, poured through the clear ancient seas, fueling countless photosynthetic organisms and allowing intricate reefs to expand across the submerged platforms, growing like silent underwater cities. The global climate of the Silurian was strikingly warm, a gentle reprieve compared to the harsh glacial grip of the Ice Age that had ended not long before. With the colossal glaciers retreating, the planet settled into a period of greenhouse conditions, a warm, nurturing embrace. Carbon dioxide levels in the ancient atmosphere were notably higher than today, trapping heat and maintaining mild, almost temperate temperatures across much of the world. Polar ice was a rare, limited presence, and without the vast reflective sheets that dominate the modern poles, sea levels were correspondingly higher, spilling over the land. The climate was not entirely without its fluctuations, its subtle shifts, but overall it offered a profound degree of stability, a steady rhythm that allowed life to flourish. This pervasive warmth, combined with the expansive, shallow seas, provided the perfect, nurturing stage for recovery after the great extinction that had so profoundly scarred the planet at the close of the Ordovician. From above, the landscapes of the Silurian would have appeared utterly alien to our modern eyes. Where we might expect rolling forests and sweeping grassy plains, there were instead endless coastlines edged with vibrant, living reefs and long, shimmering expanses of tidal flats. At low tide, these flats stretched out for kilometers, vast sheets of mud glistening under the ancient sun, crisscrossed with intricate channels and ephemeral pools. At high tide, they vanished again, swallowed beneath shallow, rhythmic waves. These environments, though strange, were incredibly rich with life, although the life itself was mostly small, delicate, and profoundly unfamiliar to modern eyes. Trilobites, those ancient armored artisans, crawled across the seafloor, leaving faint traces. Early mollusks probed the soft mud with gentle curiosity. Graptolites drifted like silent, ethereal ribbons in the open water. Closer to the equator, the reefs became the dominant, breathtaking feature. Coral and stromatoporoids, those ancient sponge-like reef builders, grew in elaborate, fantastical structures. These reefs rose like underwater cliffs, their surfaces textured with 1,000 ridges and intricate chambers, veritable cities of calcium carbonate. Schools of small, early fish darted among the corals, their scales catching the filtered light, while countless invertebrates, attached themselves to every available surface, claiming their small, vital space. These reef systems were unlike anything the planet had ever seen before, larger and more intricately designed than their Ordovician predecessors. For the organisms that managed to survive the Great Extinction, these burgeoning reefs provided both essential shelter and boundless opportunity, cradles of renewal. In other regions, the slow, patient meeting of land and sea formed broad, expansive mudflats. These were unstable, ever-changing places, shaped daily by the relentless ebb and flow of tides and the occasional fury of storms. Sediments were constantly being moved, layered, and reshaped, creating a shifting, ephemeral mosaic of habitats, a restless canvas. In the soft, yielding mud, burrowing animals left behind intricate networks of tunnels and delicate tracks, silent testimonies to their hidden lives. These ancient traces, preserved in the enduring rock record, show us how active and vibrant even the shallowest and most temporary environments could be. Mudflats also played an incredibly important role in the slow, patient preparation of the land for the eventual arrival of plants. Though still barren to the eye, their constant rhythmic cycles of wetting and drying created conditions that would, over immense spans of time, eventually allow life to gain its first tentative foothold on the shore. The Silurian earthscape was, therefore, a world profoundly dominated by features of water. Continents were smaller, almost like stepping stones, seas were higher, reaching further inland, and coastlines were complex, intricate, and ever-changing, breathing with the tides. The slow, majestic merging of Laurentia, Baltica, and Avalonia hinted at future grand geological dramas, the deep inner workings of the planet. While the reefs, tidal flats, and mudflats shaped the fertile environments where life was beginning its slow, determined recovery and its first daring experiments, it was a world of warm stability. After a time of harrowing extremes, a precious pause that gave living things the chance to adapt, to diversify, and to explore new boundless possibilities. In the quiet, nurturing warmth of the Silurian world, along the very edges of the shallow waters, something utterly new began to appear. Among the glistening mudflats and the expansive tidal plains, fragile green shoots, impossibly thin and utterly leafless, yet defiant in their posture, stood upright, challenging the empty, silent landscape around them. These were the earliest vascular plants, the quiet pioneers that would, in their humble way, change Earth more completely and profoundly than any grand creature of the sea or land. Unlike the simple algae that had for eons floated in water or clung in damp, unassuming mats to wet rock, these nascent plants carried inside them a revolutionary new invention: vascular tissue. Imagine tiny, intricate tubes, like a hidden network of veins, running through their delicate stems, allowing water and precious nutrients to be pulled upward, defying gravity, from the ground. This internal plumbing system gave them a newfound strength, the ability to rise, however modestly, above the surface, lifting themselves higher than the flat, sprawling mats of algae that lay pressed against the ancient stone. Though they stood only a few centimeters tall, their height was, in essence, a revolution. For the very first time, plants could compete for the life-giving sunlight in a completely new way, a vertical dance. And in that silent, patient competition, the profound store of Earth's future forests was irrevocably seeded. One of the earliest and most poignant of these pioneering plants is known to us as Cooksonia. Its fossils are delicate, almost ethereal, branching stems that split into simple forked patterns, each ending in small round sporangia, like tiny precious capsules that carried its vital spores. To our modern eyes, they may appear almost too simple to truly matter, a bare, unassuming twig compared to the mighty towering trees that would one day grace our world. Yet, Cooksonia was a profound signal, a quiet clarion call that Earth was beginning its slow, deliberate transformation. Its upright posture, subtly supported by that revolutionary vascular tissue, allowed it to colonize the dry land far more effectively than any organism before it. Its spores, light as dust, could be carried by the whispering wind, scattering across barren ground and settling in new, untouched places. With each passing generation, these tiny, determined plants spread further and further from the ancient shore, stepping slowly, cautiously into a territory that had remained untouched, unyielding, for hundreds of millions of years. Beneath the surface, their nascent roots and anchoring structures began their patient, relentless work, prying apart the unyielding rock. At first, these were not the deep, complex root systems we know today, but even the smallest, most tentative penetration of stone allowed life-giving water to seep in, beginning the slow, powerful process of breaking down minerals. Over immense spans of time, this quiet, persistent process created the very first true soils. Once the rock crumbled, it held moisture differently, forming nascent layers where essential nutrients could collect. These early soils were thin and patchy, like a fragile emerging skin, but they were the foundational bedrock upon which all terrestrial ecosystems would one day majestically stand. Without them, no towering forests could ever rise, no animals could ever graze, and no land-based food chains could ever truly develop. This transformation, though seemingly quiet, even agonizingly slow, cannot be overstated in its profound importance. By creating soil, plants, in their quiet persistence, rewrote the very chemistry of the land. The minerals, slowly released from the ancient rock, fed not only the plants themselves, but also the myriad microorganisms that thrived in the newly formed earth around them. Water cycles, those invisible arteries of the planet, began to change as soils absorbed and slowly released rainfall in ways that bare, unyielding rock never could. As these tiny, tenacious plants grew and spread, they began to draw more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through the silent magic of photosynthesis, releasing precious oxygen into the air. What had started as a thin, scattered scattering of delicate stems would eventually, over eons, shift the very balance of gases on a planetary scale, breathing life into a nascent world. The world before these pioneering vascular plants had been a harsh, unforgiving one. Winds swept ceaselessly across lifeless rock, carrying fine dust across vast, empty continents with no roots, no anchoring presence to hold sediments in place. Erosion was a constant, relentless force. Rainwater washed quickly off the unyielding stone, rushing back into the hungry sea. But with the quiet, determined rise of these first plants, landscapes began, almost imperceptibly, to soften. Roots held sediments together, preventing them from being swept away by ancient currents. Fragile mats of greenery trapped dust, anchoring it in place and allowing more soil to slowly form. Bit by bit, the barren, silent land was gently, patiently tamed. It is difficult, indeed, to fully grasp the sheer courage of such small, unassuming plants pushing into an empty, untamed world, with no guarantee of survival, no blueprint for success. They possessed no leaves, no vibrant flowers, no complex seeds. They were little more than branching stems, tipped with their precious spore capsules. Yet, in their very simplicity lay their profound strength. By standing upright, however modestly, they could capture the life-giving sunlight more effectively. By producing countless spores, they could spread far beyond the reach of their parent plant, claiming new territories. By patiently breaking down rock, they opened new ground, new possibilities for future generations. This single step, humble as it seemed, was Earth's greatest, most profound transformation. From it would slowly grow the vast forests that would one day cool the planet, the oxygen-rich skies that would fuel complex animal life, and the intricate ecosystems that would, in the distant future, cradle human civilization. The first vascular plants, in their quiet determination, could not have known the magnificent future they were shaping. Yet, with every fragile stem that reached for the light, and every tenacious root pressing into unyielding stone, they were building a world that was finally truly ready to support life on land. The story of Cooksonia and its kin is not one of grandeur or dramatic spectacle, but of quiet persistence against the relentless winds, against the ancient floods, against the profound indifference of barren continents. They endured, and with each passing season, they left behind a slightly different earth, one with a little more nascent soil, a little more life-giving oxygen, and a little more profound promise of what was to come. From these humble, silent beginnings, the grand conquest of land had truly begun, setting the stage for the next, even more expansive spread of greenery that would fundamentally alter the atmosphere and extend life's reach even further into the very heart of the continents. As the first vascular plants, like the intrepid Cooksonia, stood in the shallow, ancient waters, the greening of Earth began to spread in ways both fragile and profoundly transformative. Small, delicate plants, almost ethereal, resembling modern mosses and liverworts, crept outward from the wet, nurturing margins of tidal flats and the rich, muddy coastlines. They possessed no roots in the complex sense we know today, only anchoring threads that clung tenuously to the ground, but they were able to hold themselves against the ancient stone and nascent soil just enough to survive. These low, sprawling mats of greenery, like the first tentative strokes of a painter's brush across a barren canvas, softly traced the outlines of ancient rivers and meandering streams, bringing forth a nascent beauty. The spread of these early plants depended on a truly novel strategy for reproduction. Unlike animals, they did not move from place to place in search of mates. Instead, they relied on spores, microscopic capsules, light as air, carried by the whispering wind. Each spore, a tiny vessel of hope, contained the potential for a new plant, a new life. And when scattered widely, they landed in cracks, hollows and damp soil where they could begin again, a silent, persistent cycle of renewal. Spores could travel far from the parent plant, giving these pioneers a remarkable way to reach new ground without ever needing to crawl or walk. In a world utterly devoid of insects or birds to carry their future seeds, spores were in essence their wings, their silent voyagers of the air. This profound reliance on spores meant that early plants were, at first, intimately tied to water. They needed moisture, a gentle touch of dampness, for their spores to germinate, and for the delicate fertilization process to succeed. So, initially they hugged the damp edges of ancient shorelines and the misty zones around nascent lakes and rivers. But over vast spans of time, some began to adapt more fully to the formidable challenges of land, creating tougher spores with thicker, more resilient walls, better able to withstand the relentless drying out of the open air. With each small, incremental improvement, the distance they could spread inland grew greater, a slow, determined march into the heart of the barren continents. As these mats of moss-like plants expanded, something truly remarkable began to happen to the very air itself. Through the silent, wondrous alchemy of photosynthesis, they absorbed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and released precious oxygen. In the boundless oceans, algae had been performing this life-giving exchange for hundreds of millions of years. But the impact of photosynthesis on land was profoundly different. Instead of releasing oxygen into water where it dissolved or reacted with ancient minerals, it went directly, unequivocally, into the atmosphere. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the very composition of the air began to shift, to breathe anew. Oxygen levels crept steadily upward, a silent, vital ascent. With every season of growth, the atmosphere became just a little more supportive, a little more welcoming of the future animals that would one day breathe it, a grand, cosmic preparation. The landscapes themselves began to change, softening their harsh, ancient lines. Where once rainwater had rushed quickly and unhindered across bare rock, it now lingered longer in the tangled, embracing mats of greenery. Soils grew darker, richer with organic matter, thick with decayed plant material that had never existed before. The ground held moisture differently, becoming spongier in places, more stable and resilient in others. Instead of a profound silence broken only by the whispering wind, the continents began to acquire texture, both visually and chemically, a nascent, living skin. It is a quiet picture, yet an extraordinarily profound one. Imagine the edges of a continent after a soft summer rain, where the barren ground is subtly stippled with small, vibrant green clusters, spreading outwards like colonies of hope, a silent testament to life's persistence. These plants were not tall, nor were they complex in their design, yet they softened a harsh and empty world. From their tiny, fragile bodies came spores that drifted into new territory. From their delicate cells came oxygen that slowly filled the ancient air, and from their silent, determined presence came the first landscapes that looked, in some faint, nascent way, truly alive. The conquest of land was not a single, dramatic leap, but a patient, persistent spread, a slow, determined march. The first plants clung where they could, testing the unyielding ground, leaving behind precious pockets of soil and quietly preparing the land for others that would follow in their wake. In this way, they transformed the continents, not through sudden domination, but through countless tiny, incremental steps. Their mats of green spread outward, patch by delicate patch, until the once barren world began to show the first subtle hints of a future covered in majestic forests. The greening of Earth had truly begun, and with it the atmosphere itself was undergoing a profound change. The delicate balance of gases that had once belonged entirely to the boundless oceans was now being rewritten, molecule by silent molecule, above the vast, waiting continent. And as the air subtly shifted, the grand stage was being meticulously set for the creatures of the sea to eventually follow the plants onto land, taking their first tentative, courageous steps into this newly softened, more hospitable world. While plants were beginning their quiet, determined spread across the continents, life beneath the waves was stirring back to strength. A slow, vibrant reawakening. The oceans, which had been emptied by the utter devastation of the Ordovician extinction, were slowly, patiently recovering. What had once been a hollow, echoing silence began to fill again with the subtle, intricate movements of life, with new colors and diverse forms. In this majestic return of abundance, one of the most striking and enduring features of the Silurian seas rose into quiet prominence: the coral stromatoporoid reefs. These reefs were unlike anything seen before, a testament to life's boundless creativity. Coral had existed earlier, but now it began to grow in concert with stromatoporoids, ancient, sponge-like organisms that possessed the remarkable ability to build layered skeletons of calcium carbonate. Together in a silent, powerful partnership, they created vast, intricate structures that spread across the shallow seas. They were not small outcrops or scattered patches, but immense, living underwater ridges and platforms that could stretch for kilometers, veritable geological statements. In places they formed colossal walls that rose like silent, ancient cities beneath the sunlit waters, their surfaces textured with 1,000 chambers, ridges, and hollows, each a testament to countless lives. The architecture of these reefs was as varied and complex as any skyline, a testament to natural engineering. Crevices, dark and inviting, provided essential shelter for small, vulnerable creatures. Broad surfaces offered ample space for attachment and growth, and inner chambers created tranquil refuges where the water flowed more gently, a silent, nurturing embrace. Schools of early fish, their scales catching the filtered light, swam through their intricate corridors, weaving gracefully between coral towers and sponge domes. Invertebrates clung to every available surface, claiming their small vital space. Crinoids, those elegant sea lilies, extended delicate, feathery arms into the water to catch drifting food. Brachiopods anchored themselves in clusters, their bivalve shells opening and closing in a gentle, rhythmic dance, and mollusks grazed across surfaces where algae found purchase, creating a vibrant, living tapestry. For the survivors of the Great Extinction, these burgeoning reefs were havens, sanctuaries of renewal. They were nurseries where young fish could hide from lurking shadows, rich feeding grounds where invertebrates thrived in abundance, and protective barriers against the relentless force of tides and waves. Each reef was a living city, a bustling metropolis sustained by the constant, intricate cycling of nutrients. Organisms that had once struggled to find stable habitats in the bewildering aftermath of disaster now found themselves with endless possibilities, a grand, new stage upon which to evolve. The growth of these colossal reefs also subtly, yet profoundly, transformed the very chemistry of the seas. As corals and stromatoporoids built their intricate skeletons, they locked away vast amounts of carbon in solid form, creating a delicate balance in the global carbon cycle. This in turn affected the broader climate, helping the planet maintain the relative warmth and stability that so defined the Silurian. In their silent, majestic growth, these reefs were not only shaping vibrant ecosystems, but also in their own quiet way, moderating the entire world. Marine diversity began its slow, determined recovery, unfolding in gentle waves. Fish, which had been modest and limited in earlier times, now darted more confidently through the waters, their numbers steadily increasing as they adapted to the abundant shelter and resources of the reefs. Trilobites, though declining in their ancient dominance, still scuttled across the seafloor, joining new arthropod species in their roles as scavengers and feeders. Graptolites floated like delicate, drifting colonies in the open seas, filtering nutrients from the water, a silent, vital presence. All of these creatures in their myriad forms found space and purpose in the intricate mosaic of environments created by the expansive reef complexes. The importance of these reefs cannot be overstated. They acted as anchors for ecosystems that might otherwise have remained fragile, tentative. Without reefs, many organisms would have lacked stable places to settle or breed. With them, life not only returned but diversified, blossoming into new forms. The species that had survived the Ordovician collapse could now expand into new niches, experimenting with new forms, new diets, and new intricate interactions. From a distance, the reef platforms would have seemed like vast undersea continents of life, shimmering with unseen activity. Sunlight pouring through clear water illuminated their surfaces, casting intricate shadows across ridges and channels. Schools of early fish shimmered in the glow while armored predators patrolled the edges, silent and watchful. The hum of activity, though silent to us, was the vibrant heartbeat of renewal. These were ecosystems learning to thrive again, delicate yet resilient, fragile yet expansive. The reefs also marked a profound turning point in Earth's unfolding story. They represented not just survival, but stability, a deep planetary sigh of relief. After the chaos of ice ages and sudden, violent warming, after the devastating loss of nearly all marine life, the planet had found a new precarious balance. Coral stromatoporoid reefs stood as silent, majestic monuments to that balance, powerful reminders that even after profound collapse, life possesses an extraordinary power to rebuild, to adapt, and to rise higher, more intricately than before. And as these reefs expanded, the oceans became landscapes of possibility once more, ready to host the next great players in Earth's unfolding drama, including the armored hunters and the nascent giants of the shallow seas that would soon dominate these ancient waters. As the magnificent reefs expanded and life in its myriad forms returned to the vast ancient oceans, new and formidable predators began their slow, silent rise in the shallows. Among the most striking and fearsome were the Eurypterids, creatures often and dramatically called sea scorpions. These were not true insects or scorpions in the modern sense, but ancient distant relatives of arachnids, embodying a primeval grace and power. Their bodies were long and segmented, clad in tough chitinous exoskeletons that would have glinted darkly under the sunlight filtering through the water like living, ancient armor. Some species were modest in size, no larger than a human hand, but others grew into true giants, stretching to lengths of 2.5 meters, longer than the height of a grown human, a terrifying vision of ancient power. In the warm, shallow seas of the Silurian, these predators were undisputed masters of their realm. The apex of their time, with broad paddle-like appendages, they glided through the water with surprising speed and an almost eerie grace. Their swimming strokes propelled them forward in smooth, powerful motions, allowing them to close the distance to unsuspecting prey, be it a struggling fish or a hapless invertebrate, before it could ever hope to escape. When they reached their target, powerful claws, lined with sharp chitinous spines, seized hold, locking their prey in an unbreakable, fatal grip. The unique adaptations of Eurypterids gave them an undeniable advantage that few other creatures of the Silurian could match. Their armored plates offered formidable protection from rivals and from the nascent bites of the first jawed fish that were just beginning to test the waters. Their compound eyes, perched high on their heads, scanned their surroundings with astonishing precision, detecting the faintest ripple of movement, the slightest disturbance in the water. Some possessed elongated tails, tipped with menacing spines, which may have been used as weapons in combat, or perhaps as sophisticated tools for steering and maneuvering through the water. Every intricate part of their anatomy reflected the role of a predator, perfected by millions of years of silent evolution. Imagine for a moment standing in the shallow, warm water at the very edge of a Silurian reef, the surface bright with the ancient sunlight. Suddenly a vast shadow slides silently beneath you, swift and purposeful. The dark, enigmatic form resolves into the unmistakable shape of a sea scorpion, its paddles undulating with an almost hypnotic rhythm, its formidable claws open and ready. It would have inspired both profound fear and a deep, primal awe, for its sheer size and raw power were unlike anything else that shared its ancient environment. Even our modern oceans, teeming with the sleek power of sharks and the colossal majesty of whales, rarely hold predators of such striking alien form. These ancient giants did not live in isolation. They shared the waters with smaller eurypterid species that scuttled along the seafloor like busy scavengers, searching for worms or feasting from carcasses. The diversity of eurypterids was immense, a testament to their evolutionary success, with dozens of forms adapted to different habitats and ecological niches. Some preferred the mysterious depths of deeper waters, others dominated the brackish environments of estuaries or the muddy expanses of tidal flats, where they lurked in the murky shallows, silent and patient, waiting for unsuspecting prey to pass by. Together, they created a formidable dynasty of predators that endured for millions of years, profoundly shaping the complex food webs of their time. The dominance of eurypterids was not only a matter of their impressive size, it was also their sophisticated strategy. They were opportunistic hunters, capable of both ambushing their prey with sudden strikes and pursuing them with relentless determination, attacking creatures that ranged from early fish to other arthropods. Fossil evidence gently suggests that some may even have ventured close to the ancient shorelines, where their armored bodies allowed them to crawl in the shallows for short periods, testing the boundaries of their watery realm. Whether in the vast, open water or near the tantalizing edges of land, they were a powerful, undeniable presence that smaller creatures could never ignore. To imagine encountering one of these sea scorpions today is to imagine an encounter with strangeness itself, a glimpse into a truly alien past. A 2-meter predator with the armored body of a scorpion and the powerful paddles of a swimmer would seem like something plucked from a primordial nightmare. Yet, in the Silurian seas, they were not monsters, but simply the unchallenged rulers of their environment, filling the ecological role that millions of years of evolution had meticulously prepared for them. Their long reign in the shallows left an indelible imprint on ecosystems, shaping the behaviors of prey and influencing the eventual rise of competitors, like the nascent jawed fish that were beginning to emerge, challenging their ancient dominion. In this age of sea scorpions, the shallow waters were places of both incredible richness and profound danger. Reefs provided essential shelter, but they were also formidable hunting grounds. Mudflats offered abundant nutrients, but they also held lurking shadows, silent and watchful. The eurypterids were both a powerful symbol of recovery after catastrophe and a stark reminder of nature's boundless capacity to create predators of extraordinary, often terrifying form. They were an integral part of a larger, unfolding story of oceans that were slowly regaining life, only to eventually hand the grand stage in time to new rivals that would challenge even the mighty scorpions of the sea. In the Silurian seas, alongside the formidable shadows of the sea scorpions, another profound story was slowly, almost imperceptibly unfolding. Small at first, almost unnoticeable in the vastness of the ancient oceans, it would soon grow into one of the most important, most revolutionary steps in the entire history of life on Earth. For hundreds of millions of years, fish had existed as jawless creatures, their forms ancient and enduring. They fed by filtering microscopic plankton from the water through gill-like openings, or by gently scraping at surfaces with toothless mouths, their interactions with the world limited and passive. Their bodies were often armored with bony plates or scales, offering protection, but they were fundamentally constrained in how they could interact with their environment. They could feed only in simple elemental ways, utterly unable to bite, unable to seize, unable to truly grasp. That profound limitation changed irrevocably with the appearance of the first placoderms. Placoderms were a group of armored fish whose heads and upper bodies were encased in thick, interlocking plates of bone, like living, ancient suits of armor. These plates gave them a formidable, almost intimidating appearance. But what truly set them apart, what marked them as utterly revolutionary, was not only their impressive armor. For the very first time in Earth's long history, vertebrates possessed jaws. 2 arches of bone, ancient and fundamental, had shifted, flexed, and evolved into sophisticated structures capable of opening and closing with remarkable force and precision. With this singular invention, a whole new dimension of feeding became breathtakingly possible. Instead of merely scraping or passively filtering, placoderms could bite. They could grasp their prey, crush resilient shells, and tear food apart in ways no fish had ever done before. The arrival of jaws was one of the truly great turning points in the grand saga of evolution. It was more than just a new tool, it was a doorway, a wide-open portal into boundless new possibilities for survival, for dominance. A fish with jaws could pursue larger, more formidable prey. It could compete more effectively for resources. It could quite literally shape its environment by becoming a predator in the truest, most active sense of the word. With jaws, fish also developed stronger, more complex muscles in their heads and throats, making their bites even more powerful, more decisive. This newfound strength gave them access to resources and food sources that jawless creatures could never, ever explore. The placoderms were not the only pioneers of this astonishing transformation. Around the same time, another lineage of fish was beginning to appear, a lineage that would one day dominate the vast, deep oceans. These were the cartilaginous fish, the ancient, sleek ancestors of modern sharks and rays. Unlike the heavily armored placoderms, their skeletons were made of cartilage, a light and flexible material which gifted them with astonishing speed and agility. While placoderms moved through the water with the weight of their bony plates, a slow, deliberate grace, these early cartilaginous fish cut through the seas with an almost effortless agility, like silent, living arrows. Though still primitive compared to their magnificent descendants, they hinted at the formidable predators that would one day take over from the mighty sea scorpions and even the placoderms themselves, claiming the mantle of oceanic rulers. The rise of jawed fish profoundly changed the delicate balance of life in the seas. Predators became more diverse, more specialized, and prey in turn had to adapt to evolve new strategies of survival. Fish developed new defenses, from heavier, more protective scales to faster, more evasive swimming patterns. Invertebrates evolved thicker, more resilient shells and more complex, ingenious ways of hiding. For the first time, ecosystems began to show the dynamic back-and-forth rhythm of predator and prey, locked in an escalating cycle of adaptation that would continue to shape evolution through all the ages that followed, a silent, relentless dance of life and death. The sight of a Silurian reef would have been a vibrant vision of this new, evolving balance. Among the intricate corals and the domed stromatoporoid sponges, schools of smaller, jawless fish still swam, a lingering echo of the past, but now they had to navigate their world carefully, for armored placoderms lurked nearby, their formidable jaws ready to snap shut on the unwary. The first shark-like fish, with their leaner, more streamlined bodies and sharper senses, patrolled the more open waters, moving with an energy and agility that promised the future of fast pursuit, of relentless hunting. Sea scorpions still dominated the shallows, their ancient rule unchallenged for eons. But their dominion was no longer absolute. For the first time, vertebrates were beginning to truly rival arthropods as the most effective, most powerful hunters of the seas. This intricate interplay of hunters and hunted gifted the Silurian oceans with a new, dynamic rhythm. It was no longer only a world of survival through endurance or sheer numbers. It had become a world where power and precision mattered, where strategy began to define success. Jaws meant that a predator could kill more quickly and more efficiently. Prey in turn had to find new, ingenious ways to survive, whether through blinding speed, impenetrable armor, or cunning evasion. The oceans became theaters of strategy as much as strength, with each evolutionary innovation met by a counter-innovation, a relentless arms race of life. From these profound beginnings, the story of vertebrate dominance in the seas was irrevocably set in motion. The armored placoderms, for all their early might, would eventually fade into the silent pages of extinction, but the lineage of jawed fish they represented would continue to evolve, to diversify, to thrive. The cartilaginous ancestors of sharks would evolve into some of the most efficient, most breathtaking predators the world has ever known, and from the foundational blueprint laid in the Silurian, new, even more diverse forms of fish would arise in the Devonian, an age that would be forever remembered as the true age of fishes. For now, though, the Silurian oceans were alive with firsts, the first jaws snapping shut, the first armored hunters shaping ecosystems through their powerful bites, the first subtle hints of sharks beginning to emerge from the primordial depth. In this new world of predator and prey, balance itself was being rewritten, and with it, the very path that would eventually lead to every vertebrate that walks, swims, or flies today. For more than 200 million years, trilobites had been among the most successful, most ubiquitous creatures in the ancient ocean. They first appeared long before the Silurian, during the Cambrian explosion of life, and quickly diversified into hundreds of distinct forms, a testament to their adaptability. Their segmented bodies, hard exoskeletons, and remarkable ability to adapt to a myriad of habitats made them incredibly resilient survivors, enduring through numerous planetary shifts. Some lived as patient bottom dwellers, shuffling slowly through the soft sand. Others burrowed, scavenged, or even swam freely in the water column, claiming every available niche. For a vast span of time, it seemed as though trilobites would remain an eternal, unchanging presence in the seas, an ancient, enduring constant. By the Silurian, however, their long, glorious reign was slowly, gracefully fading. Trilobites were still present, of course, crawling across reef floors and mudflats, but they were no longer the dominant, pervasive force they had once been. Their diversity was subtly shrinking, a quiet contraction. The fossil record reveals fewer species compared to earlier periods, and the astonishing variety of shapes and lifestyles that had once made them so profoundly successful was beginning to contract, to narrow. Where once they had filled nearly every ecological niche in the vast marine world, now other arthropods, nimble and adaptable, were beginning to claim those roles, quietly taking over their ancient domains. One profound reason for their decline was intensifying competition. The oceans of the Silurian were becoming more complex, more dynamic, with predators and prey locked in an escalating, relentless struggle for survival. Eurypterids, the great sea scorpions, roamed the shallows with powerful claws and paddle-like limbs, hunting with astonishing speed and efficiency. Formidable rivals, smaller crustacean relatives, were also beginning to appear, more agile and adaptable in certain habitats, outmaneuvering their ancient cousins. These new arthropods could exploit food sources more effectively, often outcompeting trilobites in environments where both tried to survive, a silent struggle for resources. Predation was another immense pressure. Trilobites had long relied on their hard exoskeletons as their primary form of protection, their suits of armor. Some could even curl into tight, impenetrable balls, exposing only their armored backs to danger, a seemingly foolproof defense. This defense mechanism had worked exceptionally well against earlier, less sophisticated predators, but with the dramatic arrival of jawed fish, the calculus of survival shifted irrevocably. Jaws could crush shells, turning what had once been a reliable, enduring shield into little more than brittle armor, easily breached. Platoderms, with their bony biting plates, could crack through trilobite shells with ease, turning their ancient strength into a fatal vulnerability. What had protected them for millions of years was simply no longer enough. Fossils, those silent storytellers of deep time, give us poignant glimpses of this unfolding narrative. In certain rocks, trilobite shells bear distinct scars and bite marks, undeniable evidence of ancient encounters with predators that left them damaged or dead. Frozen in time, other fossils show how their once vast teeming numbers had dwindled. In Cambrian layers, trilobite fossils can dominate entire slabs of stone, pressed together in dense clusters that suggest thriving, countless populations. But by the Silurian, those dense fields of fossils had given way to scattered individuals, a fading echo. They were still present, still a part of the intricate fabric of marine life, but their abundance, their sheer omnipresence, was no longer the same. The decline of trilobites was not immediate or total, not a sudden dramatic disappearance. Many groups continued to survive through the Silurian and into later periods, a testament to their enduring resilience. Some even managed to diversify again, finding temporary success in specific, isolated environments. But the long arc of their history was bending downward, a slow, inevitable descent from their ancient glory. Each extinction event, each new competitor, each new predator chipped away at their resilience, eroding their once unshakable dominance. The Silurian marks the profound point at which they began to subtly slip from dominance into the shadows of other creatures rising around them, a quiet changing of the guard. The sight of a Silurian reef would have told this story with quiet clarity. Trilobites could still be found, their many-legged bodies moving slowly, deliberately across the seafloor, their antennae twitching as they searched for food. Some rested in burrows, their compound eyes peeking out from beneath a layer of sediment, Watchful, others crept among the corals, scavenging from the remains of meals left behind by larger, more formidable predators. But they were no longer the rulers of these environments, no longer the undisputed kings. Around them swam jawed fish, swift and powerful, a new force. Above them hunted eurypterids, their formidable claws ready to seize. Even the smaller arthropods, nimble and quick, pressed in around them, claiming their share. The fossil record preserves the poignant silence of their shrinking presence. Where once trilobites had been countless, their shells forming layers of stone across entire continents, their remains in the Silurian speak more softly, a fading murmur. They were still there, but no longer filling the oceans with the same energy and diversity. The stage was shifting, and trilobites were being gently, inexorably pushed to the margin. This gradual decline set the quiet tone for what would come next. Other creatures rising in number and variety would take advantage of the opportunities left behind, filling the vacated niche. The balance of marine life was changing, moving steadily toward ecosystems where vertebrates, corals, and new arthropods would dominate, claiming the future. Trilobites, once powerful symbols of abundance, had become poignant reminders of a past world, gracefully fading into memory. While trilobites still clung to their dwindling place in the seas, another story was quietly unfolding at the very edges of ancient shorelines. The conquest of land, which had begun so tentatively with the earliest, most fragile plants, was about to take its next hesitant, yet profoundly significant step. For countless ages, dry land had been an empty, unforgiving expanse, a harsh frontier of bare stone and blowing dust, utterly devoid of animal life. But now, small arthropods, distant cousins of the mighty trilobites and formidable sea scorpions, began to tentatively test this new alien world. These first pioneers were not yet insects in the complex way we think of them today, but they carried with them the same segmented bodies and jointed legs that would one day give rise to the myriad forms of flies, beetles, and butterflies. The fossil record, that ancient library of stone, tells us that millipede-like creatures were among the earliest to take those courageous steps onto dry land. Their bodies were long and low to the ground, armored with overlapping plates, like tiny flexible suits of mail, and their many legs rippled in coordinated waves as they slowly crawled across damp surfaces. Some of the earliest fossil tracks, preserved in ancient sediments, record the faint, delicate impressions of these tiny legs pressing into soft mud flats, vanishing moments in deep time that hint at the profound courage of small animals venturing into a vast, unfamiliar, and potentially hostile world. One might wonder, why did they leave the water at all, that ancient, nurturing cradle? The answer lies partly in a burgeoning opportunity. Plants were beginning their quiet growth along shorelines, anchoring the nascent soil and creating fragile patches of green. With them came decaying organic matter, a completely new source of food for detritus-feeding arthropods. The land offered rich, untapped rewards, if only they could survive its formidable challenges. The air, this new vast medium, held oxygen, and on a small micro-environmental scale, oxygen levels near patches of early plants may have been especially high, creating miniature, breathable oases. These microenvironments created tiny sanctuaries where small animals could breathe more easily, a precious gift. With each cautious, tentative step, arthropods were learning to take advantage of these new conditions, adapting slowly, patiently, to life outside the sea. The challenges, however, were immense, almost insurmountable. In the water, gills could extract oxygen efficiently, effortlessly, but in the dry, open air, those same delicate organs would quickly collapse and fail, a fatal vulnerability. Early land arthropods had to rely on new, ingenious ways of drawing oxygen into their bodies. Tube-like openings called spiracles and simple rudimentary breathing structures allowed them to survive short journeys onto land, brief forays into the unknown. Their exoskeletons, which in the ocean served mainly as protective armor, now took on another, equally vital purpose, helping to retain precious moisture in a world where dehydration was a constant, deadly threat. Every adaptation, however small, mattered profoundly, for the margin between life and death, on bare, exposed rock, was incredibly narrow, a razor's edge. The emotional weight of those first footsteps cannot be overstated. Imagine a coastline in the Silurian, the waves rolling onto vast mudflats, as they had for hundreds of millions of years, an ancient unchanging rhythm. The tide recedes, leaving wet sand glistening under a pale, ancient sunlight. And then for the very first time in Earth's history, a living creature pushes tentatively forward on jointed legs, not swimming or floating, but crawling, actively, purposefully. Its tiny body leaves a trail of minute impressions, a delicate, ephemeral line across the soft mud. It is a moment so infinitesimally small that it would pass utterly unnoticed by the planet itself. Yet it carries within it the profound seed of every insect, every spider, and every crustacean that would follow, a silent, cosmic promise. Over time, more arthropods bravely joined the experiment. Some ventured farther inland, hugging the damp edges of streams, or shaded areas where mosses and liverworts held precious moisture. Each generation tested the limits of survival a little more, pushing the boundaries. Fossil evidence of breathing structures and hardened cuticles gently suggests that natural selection was steadily refining their ability to endure the open air, the harsh sunlight, and the relentless dryness. The land, once silent and utterly lifeless, now carried the faint, almost imperceptible sounds of tiny legs rustling across the nascent soil, a new, fragile symphony. These first arthropods were not formidable hunters of large prey, nor were they builders of great structures. They were small, unassuming recyclers, patiently feeding on detritus, breaking down plant matter, and beginning the first foundational terrestrial food webs. Their work, though quiet and often overlooked, was absolutely essential. By decomposing organic material, they helped return vital nutrients to the soil, making it richer and more capable of supporting expanding plant life. In this profound way, animals and plants together formed the earliest beginnings of a true interconnected ecosystem on land. The sight of one of these millipede-like crawlers against the vast, silent backdrop of an empty continent would have been both strange and deeply moving. A tiny creature, dwarfed by an immense silence, creeping across stone that had never before known the weight of an animal. Each step was a claim, however fragile, on a new, untamed world. These were the first footsteps on Earth's barren soil, the profound beginning of a journey that would eventually fill the land with majestic forests, countless insects, and the diverse animals that would follow. From these tentative, courageous movements, life's great migration from sea to land gained its first powerful momentum. What began with a few cautious crawlers would in time become a flood of diversity, an explosion of terrestrial life. The conquest of land was no longer a dream held only by plants and fungi. Now animals too had begun to take part, setting in motion a story that would shape every future chapter of Earth's magnificent history. As the first plants crept further inland, their fragile roots seeking purchase, and the earliest arthropods began to press their delicate bodies against the nascent soil, something even larger, more profound was changing. It was not confined to a small patch of moss or a faint line of footprints in the mud. It was the very air itself. For the first time in Earth's long evolving history, the atmosphere, that invisible blanket enveloping our world, was being reshaped not only by the deep geological forces of volcanoes and the vast, line to oceans, but by living things that grew patiently and persistently from stone and stretched with quiet determination toward the life-giving sunlight. When plants, in their unassuming way, established themselves along the edges of ancient coastlines, their impact went far beyond the simple green shoots visible to the eye. Through the silent, wondrous alchemy of photosynthesis, they began to draw in carbon dioxide, the atmospheric breath of the past, and release oxygen, the vital breath of the future. A quiet exchange that gradually, yet profoundly, altered the delicate balance of the skies. Oceans had always carried photosynthetic algae, and these tiny, ubiquitous organisms had been releasing oxygen for hundreds of millions of years. Yet, in the Silurian, photosynthesis reached the land, a new frontier. Here, above the rhythmic tides, the air itself became the primary medium of transformation. Each patch of moss or nascent vascular stem was like a small living pump, silently breathing carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. Individually, these plants were fragile, often only a few centimeters tall, but together, in their countless multitude, they began to shift the composition of the atmosphere in ways that would ripple outward across vast spans of time, a planetary metamorphosis. This crucial increase in oxygen did not happen all at once, not in a sudden, dramatic burst. It was a gradual, incremental rise, measured in small, almost imperceptible increments over millions of years. But those small, steady changes carried immense, profound meaning. Higher oxygen levels made the air more breathable, not just for the first intrepid arthropods crawling on land, but eventually for every creature that would follow. A grand cosmic preparation. It also meticulously set the stage for larger and more complex organisms to evolve in the distant future, their very existence dependent on this atmospheric gift. The air that fills our lungs today, every life-giving breath, carries within it the indelible legacy of those first Silurian plants, whose simple tissues began a chain of events that still sustains life, billions of breaths later. At the same time, the tenacious roots of these early plants were reaching down into the ancient rock and sediment, creating the earliest beginnings of true soil. This new soil acted as more than just a surface for growth. It became a sophisticated system for capturing and storing carbon. As plants died and decayed, carbon that might once have lingered in the air was locked away, imprisoned in sediments, a geological time capsule. Roots also released organic acids that patiently broke down minerals, allowing vital nutrients to cycle through ecosystems for the very first time on land. This intricate process helped stabilize levels of carbon dioxide, moderating the dramatic swings between extreme heat and biting cold that had once governed Earth's ancient climate. The effect was subtle, but profoundly significant. In earlier ages, climate had lurched violently between deep freezes and searing warmth, driven largely by dramatic shifts in volcanic activity and the majestic dance of continental positions. Now, with plants slowly regulating carbon through their growth and decay, Earth began to find a steadier rhythm, a more gentle pulse. Instead of violent swings, the climate entered a calmer, more predictable phase. Greenhouse gases still rose and fell, of course, but the intricate feedback loops of roots and soils added a new, stabilizing hand to the system. It was the profound beginning of a balance between geology and biology, a powerful partnership that would grow ever more important as vast forests expanded in later periods. Imagine for a moment the atmosphere of the Silurian sky. It was not yet the clear, vibrant blue dome we know today, but it was slowly, patiently gaining the composition that would make such skies possible. The air carried more oxygen than in earlier ages, enough to support a new variety of life, yet still far below modern levels. To breathe it, for us, would have been difficult, a struggle, but to the first intrepid land dwellers, it was an invaluable gift, a breath of fresh possibility. Every patch of greenery was like a silent beacon, enriching the air above it, and every square meter of soil was a quiet reservoir, patiently holding carbon and moisture, meticulously preparing the world for greater abundance, for a future teeming with life. These profound atmospheric changes also subtly influenced the chemistry of the vast oceans. With more stable levels of carbon dioxide, surface waters warmed and cooled in gentler, more predictable cycles. Coral reefs, already thriving, were given steadier conditions in which to grow, to expand their underwater cities. Nutrients patiently carried from land into ancient rivers and estuaries fed marine ecosystems, intricately tying together the health of continents and seas in ways that had never existed before. The rise of plants was not only a terrestrial event, it was a planetary shift that touched every breath of air and every rhythmic wave of the sea, a truly global transformation. As time moved inexorably on, the slow, steady enrichment of oxygen and the careful regulation of carbon dioxide would allow more ambitious, more complex steps onto land, paving the way for larger, more diverse plants, a myriad of new arthropods, and eventually the intrepid vertebrates that would, in their own time, crawl from the water, forever altering the course of life. But in the Silurian, these changes were still quiet, measured not in sudden, dramatic leaps, but in patient, persistent accumulation. The air was learning to hold life, and life was learning to shape the air, a silent, symbiotic dance. With the atmosphere finding this new, delicate balance, the grand stage was meticulously set for Earth to undergo even more dramatic transformation. Deep beneath the surface, the restless, unseen movements of continents were preparing to reshape the very outline of the planet, drawing vast land masses together and slowly, inexorably closing ancient oceans, a deep geological slumber. While plants and small tenacious animals were beginning to subtly alter the air and soil above the surface, deep within Earth's very core, another immense force was tirelessly at work. It was the slow, unstoppable, majestic motion of the continents, driven by the profound heat rising from the planet's fiery core. What seemed like still, silent ground was in fact always on the move, gliding on molten currents far below, a silent, cosmic dance. In the Silurian, this deep inner movement was shaping the world into a new complex form, one that would determine where vast seas gathered, where majestic mountains rose, and where life in all its burgeoning diversity could truly thrive. The great Iapetus Ocean, which for millions of years had stretched like a primordial sea between ancient continents, was beginning its slow, majestic closure. This vast body of water, once as wide as the modern Atlantic, slowly narrowed as the continents surrounding it drifted together, drawn by the restless, unseen motion of Earth's crust. Piece by piece, Laurentia Baltica and Avalonia crept closer, like ancient dancers approaching their partner, drawn by an irresistible force. Where they met, the colossal seafloor was thrust downward, swallowed into the deep, fiery mantle, a geological sacrifice. Above, immense, unimaginable pressure folded and fractured the land, raising it into ridges and ranges that had never before touched the sky, fresh, nascent mountains. The collision of continents created mountains that stood as fresh, jagged scars on the surface of the planet, monuments to colossal power. These nascent ranges were not as high as the towering Himalayas of today, but in the Silurian landscape they were dramatic, formidable, jagged lines cutting across coastlines and plains. Their roofs were raw and sharp, not yet softened by the patient hand of erosion, and their slopes spilled precious sediments into nearby seas. Every river that carried particles of ground rock into the water helped enrich shallow basins, feeding nascent coral reefs and nurturing new thriving ecosystems. The birth of mountains was also, in a profound sense, the birth of fresh soils, as minerals exposed to wind and water broke down to nourish the expanding green world. A silent, vital exchange. The closing of the Iapetus Ocean did more than simply reshape the land. It profoundly altered the circulation of water across the entire planet. Oceans are not still. They are vast, intricate conveyors of heat and nutrients, driven by the majestic positions of continents and the subtle pull of winds. When the Iapetus narrowed and eventually disappeared, it forced ocean currents into new uncharted paths. Warm waters that once flowed freely across its immense width were redirected, changing climates along distant coasts, a ripple effect across the globe. Cold currents shifted too, bringing life-giving oxygen and essential nutrients to different depths. The seas of the Silurian were alive with coral, fish and arthropods, and all of them felt the subtle guiding hand of these new currents, shaping their world. To imagine this, picture Earth from above, as if suspended in the cosmic void. The continents, still smaller than the ones we know today, are like fragments drifting toward one another, drawn by an unseen magnet. Laurentia sat near the equator, its tropical warmth feeding shallow, turquoise seas. Baltica and Avalonia approached it from the south, slowly, inexorably closing the vast gap of the Iapetus. Between them stretched a narrowing ocean, its waters funneled through tighter channels as land pressed closer. Where these fragments touched, mountains heaved upward, like the planet breathing, and the very geography of the planet shifted in ways that would last for tens of millions of years, an enduring legacy. For the life that swam in Silurian waters, these immense changes meant both new opportunities and new challenges. Coral reefs grew larger, more intricate, along the edges of continents, enriched by sediments and nutrients from the rising mountains. Fish and invertebrates found new, diverse habitats in these burgeoning reef systems, expanding in diversity, a blossoming of life. At the same time, shifting circulation could also bring instability, stirring up coastlines and subtly altering where oxygen reached deeper waters, testing life's resilience. Life had to adjust, just as it always had, to the slow and powerful rhythm of tectonic change, a constant dance of adaptation. The creation of mountain ranges also meticulously set the stage for climates that were more varied, more nuanced. Across the continents, higher elevations cooled the air, casting long shadows that altered rainfall patterns and created subtle yet significant differences between coast and interior. The winds carried precious moisture from seas onto slopes where rivers began to carve valleys that would later host a burgeoning array of plants and animals. Even in the Silurian, when land was still largely barren, the foundational blueprints of these future ecosystems were being prepared by the slow, relentless grind of tectonic plates, a deep planetary hum. These profound changes unfolded over spans of time, so vast that no single creature could ever perceive them, a slow-motion ballet, yet their consequences were immense, immeasurable. Every collision of land, every mountain that rose majestically from the sea, was part of a grand story that intricately linked geology and biology together, an inseparable partnership. The currents of the ocean and the very shape of the continents were not separate from life. They were the grand stage upon which life evolved, a cosmic theatre. And while the land was rising into majestic mountains, the world of fire beneath the surface was far from silent. Volcanoes, fed by the same powerful tectonic forces, were reshaping coasts with rivers of molten lava, creating landscapes where land and sea collided in even more dramatic, fiery ways. While continents collided in slow, majestic grandeur, and mountain ranges rose from the closing of the ancient Apatis Ocean, another primal force worked restlessly across the surface. Volcanoes, fed by the same deep unseen motions of Earth's crust, they marked the landscape with fire, their eruptions pouring molten rock across coasts and islands, reshaping the land in sudden, violent bursts of heat and ash. Though seemingly destructive, these events played a quiet yet profound role in preparing Earth for the eventual spread of life, creating soils rich in vital minerals and dramatic landscapes where water, fire, and the first tentative greenery could meet in a fragile yet powerful balance. Imagine standing at the edge of a Silurian shoreline. The air is heavy with warmth, thick with anticipation. The seas stretch shallow and wide, shimmering under the ancient sun, and on the distant horizon, a volcano looms, a silent sentinel. Its slopes are streaked with hardened lava, black and stark against the softer tones of mudflats and nascent reefs. Without warning, fire bursts from its summit, a primal roar. Clouds of ash rise in ominous plumes into the sky, obscuring the sun. Streams of molten lava pour downward, hissing as they meet the encroaching sea. The water boils and churns, releasing plumes of steam that climb into the air, a cosmic sigh. For hours, or even days, the eruption transforms everything nearby. Where there was once coastline, now lies fresh raw rock, bare and stark. At first glance, it would have seemed like utter devastation, a landscape of ruin. Yet these eruptions, in their destructive power, provided an unexpected foundation for life. Volcanic rock, though harsh and unforgiving in its immediate aftermath, is incredibly rich in minerals. When it cools and patiently weathers, it breaks down into fertile soils that can nourish plants, a hidden gift. In the Silurian, as the first vascular stems pressed upward from the ground, volcanic landscapes offered precious patches where growth could tentatively take hold. Tiny plants, no more than a few centimeters tall, anchored themselves in cracks within the ancient stone, sending fragile roots into crevices. With each root, the rock fractured further, crumbling into fine particles that became the very basis of soil. Lava that once destroyed now became the seedbed for Earth's future forests, a testament to renewal. The profound meeting of lava and water created other strange and dramatic environments. As molten rock entered shallow seas, it formed new land almost instantly, solidifying in shapes that look jagged and alien, like abstract art. Pillars of black basalt rose where waves once rolled. Steam clouds turned the skies hazy, mixing with ash to create temporary, ethereal nights. For the creatures of the Silurian seas, from eurypterids to early fish, these eruptions brought sudden, seismic changes. Reef ecosystems could be smothered under falling ash, their vibrant life momentarily halted. Yet over time, the nutrients released by volcanic debris enriched the waters, allowing corals and algae to grow again, to reclaim their space. The cycle of destruction and renewal was constant, a powerful rhythm that shaped both land and sea. These volcanic regions would have been some of the most dramatic, most awe-inspiring places on Earth to witness. Imagine coastlines where rivers of fire met shallow lagoons filled with vibrant coral. The bright orange glow of lava contrasted starkly with the calm green shoots just beginning to spread across nearby rock. In one direction stood lifeless black stone, still smoking from a recent eruption. In another, small, tenacious patches of plants clung to nascent soil, softening the harsh edges of the landscape. Fire, water, and green life met in a fragile, yet powerful balance, each force reshaping the other, a cosmic dance. The gases released by volcanoes also subtly influenced the air. Carbon dioxide poured into the atmosphere with each eruption, joining the slow, patient adjustments already made by plants and soils. While too much volcanic activity could warm the planet over long stretches of time, the delicate balance between eruptions and plant growth helped regulate the climate. Every burst of fire added another intricate thread to the complex web that tied geology and biology together. The living world and the restless earth beneath it were inseparable, each shaping the other's fate. Ash carried by ancient winds spread far beyond eruption sites, settling into oceans and across continents. These layers of ash, preserved in rock today, serve as invaluable time markers for geologists, thin stripes within limestone and shale that record ancient moments of fire, frozen in deep time. To the Silurian world, they were both a challenge and a gift. Plants found vital nutrients in the ash. Animals found new coastlines where none had existed before, and ecosystems slowly reclaimed what eruptions had taken, resilient and persistent. It is easy to picture these volcanic landscapes as places of inherent danger, filled with fire and smoke. Yet they were also places of profound beginnings. On fresh stone, the first greenery appeared more vivid, each small stem standing out against the dark, stark background of lava fields. In tidal pools carved by cooling rock, arthropods crept along damp edges, exploring new territories. In nearby reefs, marine life flourished. Once sediments settled, these were places where Earth revealed its dual nature, at once destructive and creative, violent and fertile. And while volcanoes shaped the coasts with fire, in the seas beyond, reefs continued to grow in size and complexity, forming underwater worlds that rivaled the grandeur of any mountain range. Beyond the coastlines where volcanoes spilled their fiery essence into shallow waters, another world was growing in quiet magnificence. Beneath the surface, reefs were rising, vast, living structures built, not of stone alone, but of countless organisms working together in silent, intricate harmony. They were the coral and stromatoporoid partnerships of the Silurian, a profound union that transformed shallow seas into bustling underwater cities, teeming with life. Corals had already existed for millions of years, ancient and enduring, but in the Silurian, they found powerful, symbiotic allies, stromatoporoids, a group of sponge-like organisms, fused with corals to create structures that were larger, more intricate and more enduring than either could have built alone. Layer upon painstaking layer of calcium carbonate was deposited as these creatures grew, solidifying into resilient frameworks that could stand firm against the relentless force of waves and currents. Over vast spans of time, these frameworks became reefs that stretched for kilometers, forming natural barriers, tranquil lagoons, and expansive platforms teeming with life. Swimming above one of these Silurian reefs would have been like entering a different world entirely, a vibrant, alien realm. The seas were warm, clear, and shallow, bathed in a golden sunlight that illuminated every intricate detail of the living landscape. Between branching corals and domed stromatoporoids, countless species found a home, a sanctuary. Fish darted through narrow channels, their armored scales glinting in the filtered light. Crinoids, sometimes called sea lilies, raised their feathery arms into the water, swaying gently to catch drifting food. Brachiopods, shelled creatures that anchored themselves to the reef, covered surfaces in great numbers, opening and closing their valves in a gentle rhythmic dance. Mollusks grazed across surfaces where algae found purchase, creating a vibrant, living tapestry. The biodiversity of these reefs was astonishing for their time, a true explosion of form. Before the Silurian, reefs had been smaller, more rudimentary, and less complex. Now they became enormous hubs of activity, comparable in ecological importance to the great coral reefs of the modern world. Every crevice, dark and inviting, offered shelter to small invertebrates. Every ledge provided a hunting ground for predators. Trilobites, though in decline globally, still scuttled across the reef floor, scavenging among the shadows, clinging to their ancient ways. Early jawed fish patrolled the waters, their new power evident, while eurypterids prowled the margins, testing the edges of this bustling habitat. The reefs themselves were more than just habitats. They were stabilizers of the vast oceans. Their massive structures broke the force of waves, creating calm, protected lagoons where sediments could settle and life could flourish in peace. They captured and recycled vital nutrients, building resilience into ecosystems that were still recovering from earlier extinctions. By expanding into shallow seas across the globe, Silurian reefs turned once empty waters into thriving communities, spreading biodiversity like vibrant green patches across a barren landscape, a silent, living miracle. The sheer scale of these reefs is difficult to imagine without comparison. In places like what is now Gotland in Sweden, the fossilized remains of Silurian reefs still stretch across the land, preserved in limestone cliffs. These ancient structures are so vast and intricately detailed that geologists can literally walk through them as though exploring the frozen ruins of an underwater city. Every layer of stone preserves the slow, patient growth of corals and stromatoporoids, and every fossil reveals a piece of the bustling life that once thrived there. To stand before these fossil reefs is to glimpse the breathtaking architecture of deep time, silent minant of ecosystems that supported the earliest complex communities of fish and invertebrates. Reefs also played a crucial role in shaping the very chemistry of the oceans. By locking calcium carbonate into their skeletons, corals and stromatoporoids altered the delicate balance of minerals in seawater, a process that profoundly influenced marine chemistry for millions of years. Their structures trapped sediments, filtered water, and created gradients of light and shade that encouraged further diversification. Reefs were not passive backdrops to life. They were powerful engines of ecological complexity, continually creating new opportunities for organisms to adapt and expand. The visual beauty of these reefs, if we could see them through the mists of time, would have been breathtaking. Picture vast expanses of shallow seas, their floors covered in branching corals, domed stromatoporoids, and clusters of crinoids swaying gently with the current. Brightly armored fish swam in schools, their bodies flashing in the sunlight. Shelled brachiopods covered the reef surface like fields of blossoms. Small predators darted in and out of coral branches, while larger hunters glided silently above. Every moment was filled with motion, every surface alive with color and texture, a vibrant symphony of life. As reefs expanded, they created new coastlines and lagoons that reshaped the very geography of shallow seas. Volcanic islands became fringed with coral, their black basalt softened by living walls of white and pink. Sediments from rising mountain ranges were caught and stabilized by reef systems, protecting coastlines from erosion. In this profound way, reefs connected the powerful forces of land and sea, geology and biology, into a single evolving system. And while reefs flourished beneath the surface, in open waters beyond their protection, new predators were rising, armored fish with powerful jaws that would begin to test the delicate balance of these fragile ecosystems as reefs grew across the shallow seas, creating vast underwater cities. As vast underwater cities of life expanded across the shallow seas, another profound shift was beginning in the open waters beyond their coral walls. It was not a change in the corals or the myriad invertebrates that clung to them, but in the vertebrates that swam above. For hundreds of millions of years, the seas had been ruled by creatures that either filtered tiny food from the water or hunted with claws and spines, their methods ancient and enduring. Now, for the first time, fish with true jaws began to claim their rightful place in the oceans, ushering in a new era. With jaws came new power, a revolutionary capability, and with that power came predators that profoundly reshaped the balance of life. Among the first of these new hunters were the acanthodians, sometimes referred to as spiny fish. Their bodies were sleek and elongated, like living arrows, with rows of sharp spines jutting from their fins. Though many were small compared to later giants, their appearance marked a silent revolution. They were fast swimmers, their skeletons made of cartilage rather than dense bone, a lightweight structure that gave them astonishing agility in the water. In their shape and movement, they bore a striking resemblance to the sharks that would come much later, gliding through shallow seas in sudden bursts of speed. Some fed on plankton, filtering it from the water with gill rakers, while others snapped up smaller animals with their newly acquired jaws. Even in their modest size, they powerfully demonstrated the versatility that jaws could bring to the hunt. Placoderms, by stark contrast, were armored giants compared to the nimble acanthodians. Their bodies were clad in thick plates of bone that encased their heads and shoulders, giving them the formidable appearance of living tanks, ancient and powerful. Unlike the soft-bodied arthropods or the delicate shells of brachiopods, these fish carried protection that few creatures could penetrate, a testament to their strength. But the most significant feature of placoderms was not their armor. It was their jaws, hinged and lined with sharp edges of bone. These jaws could bite with immense force, gripping prey in ways no earlier creature could. Where eurypterids relied on claws and spines, placoderms could seize, tear, and crush. In a world where such a skill had never existed before, this was a profound evolutionary leap, a game changer. The presence of these new predators fundamentally altered marine ecosystems in ways that rippled outward through every reef and lagoon. Fish that could be hunted developed new strategies of survival, swimming faster or seeking deeper shelter among coral branches. Invertebrates that had once lived exposed on open seafloors now found themselves vulnerable, their shells no longer enough to guarantee safety. The simple food webs of earlier oceans began to shift into more complex, dynamic systems of predator and prey, of chase and escape. Each bite taken by a placoderm or an acanthodian echoed into the evolution of countless other species, forcing them to adapt or vanish, a relentless evolutionary pressure. The sight of a Silurian sea, filled with these early predators, would have been both mesmerizing and unsettling. Imagine standing above a clear lagoon, looking down through the water. Schools of armored placoderms patrol the shallows, their plated heads moving with a slow, deliberate rhythm, while spiny acanthodians dart past in sudden flashes of speed. Beneath them, brachiopods and corals hold steady, seemingly unaware of the hunters above, yet part of their intricate world. Each movement of these fish speaks of the new reality. The age of passive feeders was ending, and the age of active predation had truly begun. These early predators were not yet the undisputed rulers of the sea in the way that sharks would later become, but they were pioneers, true trailblazers. They opened ecological niches that had never existed, proving that jaws could be used not only for feeding on plants or plankton, but for grasping, tearing, and dominating. In time, this singular innovation would give rise to sharks, bony fish, and eventually the ancestors of amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. The power of jaws would echo far beyond the Silurian, shaping every corner of Earth's future ecosystems, an enduring legacy. As placoderms and acanthodians spread, they joined the reefs and shallow seas as integral players in the expanding web of life. Their rise was not the end of the story, but a profound turning point. For every predator that hunted, there were smaller, stranger creatures that thrived in their shadows, weaving new essential roles into the intricate fabric of marine life. While armored placoderms and spiny acanthodians were beginning to prowl the reefs and lagoons, not every life form in the Silurian seas depended on jaws and armor for survival. Some of the most important players in this watery world were far smaller, stranger, and more delicate. They were creatures that did not inspire fear in the way giant sea scorpions did, nor did they gleam with heavy plates of bone. Yet, without them, the oceans would not have thrived. They would have been fundamentally incomplete. These quiet drifters and crawlers were the hidden engines, the unseen powerhouses of Silurian ecosystems. Among them were the graptolites, colonies of filter feeders that floated like thin, ethereal ribbons through the open seas. To the eye, they would have seemed almost insubstantial, delicate chains of tiny cups, linked together, drifting passively with the ancient currents. Each cup housed a small animal, and together the colony lived as one, a collective life. They fed by patiently straining plankton from the water, capturing the copistrachic life that teemed invisibly around them, a silent, vital harvest. Graptolites left behind fossils that look like faint pencil scratches pressed into shale, dark, zigzagging lines that trace the outlines of their ancient colonies. These fossils are so abundant and distinctive that geologists still use them as crucial markers to date ancient rocks, a powerful testament to how widespread and pervasive graptolites once were. For millions of years, graptolites drifted across the oceans in vast numbers, their colonies rising and falling with the rhythmic tides. They were not hunters, and they built no reefs, yet they occupied a vital, foundational role at the very base of the food chain. By capturing plankton, they made energy available to larger creatures, a crucial transfer of life. In their countless swarms, they were a constant, abundant source of food for early fish and other filter feeders. To picture the Silurian Sea without them is impossible, for they were as integral to those waters as sunlight itself, an invisible yet indispensable presence. Alongside these floating colonies lived other small but fascinating animals. Early mollusks, the ancient ancestors of creatures we would recognize today as clams, snails, and squids, moved through reefs and shallow bays. Some clung to rocks or burrowed into sediments, filtering food from the water, while others grazed on algae that grew along the seafloor, a gentle, rhythmic foraging. Their shells came in many shapes: coiled spirals, ridged cones, and simple, smooth ovals. Each form a unique solution to survival in a competitive sea. Among the most striking of these mollusks were the early nautiloid relatives, cephalopods whose ancestors had once been the rulers of Ordovician oceans. By the Silurian, their numbers were fewer, a subtle decline, but their presence was still unmistakable, an elegant, enduring legacy. Imagine long, straight-shelled nautiloids gliding through the water, their tentacles reaching out to grasp prey. Some were small, no longer than a hand, while others stretched several meters, their shells striped and chambered, housing the animal in its outermost, largest section. Using jet propulsion, they could move with sudden bursts of speed, making them some of the most agile hunters in the ancient seas. Although overshadowed by the dramatic rise of jawed fish, these nautiloids remained important predators, maintaining their ancient role in the delicate balance of marine life. What tied these diverse creatures together was not size or strength, but their profound, essential role in supporting entire ecosystems. Graptolites fed on the invisible abundance of plankton, turning sunlight into sustenance for larger animals. Mollusks recycled nutrients by grazing, filtering, and burrowing, their constant activity keeping sediments alive with motion. Nautiloids and their relatives maintained pressure on smaller prey, shaping the dynamics of food chains. They were the quiet background players, the unseen architects. Yet without them, the reefs would have been emptier and the seas less diverse, less vibrant. The Silurian Ocean was not a place dominated only by giants. It was alive with multitudes of these smaller beings, each one essential to the rhythm of life. Imagine drifting beneath the surface. Armored placoderms move above, their plated heads glinting in the light. But in the water around you, ribbons of graptolites twist gently with the current, while coiled mollusks rest on the seafloor, and straight-shelled nautiloids glide in slow, graceful arcs. It is a world both strange and delicately balanced, where the smallest creatures often carried the heaviest burden of sustaining life. These modest players meticulously set the stage for what was to come, proving that complexity does not always begin with size or strength. In the quiet work of filter feeding, grazing, and drifting, they built the invisible framework upon which larger predators relied, and as life expanded into new forms and new habitats, the enduring record of these strange, beautiful creatures would remain, etched into stone, whispering of seas that once swarmed with colonies, shells, and tentacles. Beyond these delicate drifters, the story of the Silurian is also told in the rocks themselves, where their fossils, alongside corals and stromatoporoids, preserve vivid snapshots of a world in profound transition. Long after the vast, ancient seas of the Silurian receded and vanished, their profound story remained hidden, patiently written in stone. The world that once swarmed with graptolites, placoderms, sea scorpions, and vibrant coral reefs did not disappear entirely. It left behind indelible traces, pressed into the very fabric of the earth, records so delicate that they could easily have been lost to the relentless march of time, yet so resilient that they endured for hundreds of millions of years. These fossils are our precious window into a forgotten age, a glimpse into a primordial past, and they lie waiting in the layers of limestone that formed when ancient seas hardened into enduring rock. Limestone is born from water, a slow, patient alchemy. In shallow seas, the shells and skeletons of countless organisms settle to the bottom, mixing with sediments of sand and mud. Over time, as layers build and immense pressure grows, these ancient remains compact into stone. Within these layers, the intricate details of the Silurian world were captured, frozen in time. Fossils of corals, brachiopods, crinoids, and mollusks are sealed into limestone deposits, still preserving the precise shapes they had when they lived, a silent testament to their ancient forms. The cliffs of Wenlock Edge in England and the island of Gotland in Sweden are among the most famous examples, places where you can walk across landscapes built almost entirely from Silurian seas. Every surface whispers the story of life that flourished hundreds of millions of years ago, a vibrant, unseen past. Among the most important of these fossils are stromatoporoids, the sponge-like organisms that partnered with corals to build the magnificent reefs. Their layered skeletons became massive structures, and when preserved in limestone, they serve as unmistakable markers of ancient reefs. To a paleontologist, a stromatoporoid fossil is more than just a stone. It is undeniable evidence of a bustling ecosystem. Where they are found, one can vividly imagine a reef filled with darting fish, anchored brachiopods, and colonies of graptolites floating nearby, a vibrant, unseen world. The fossils map out the outlines of ancient cities beneath the sea, showing us where reefs once stood and how they spread across the Silurian world, a grand, submerged architecture. These fossils are not only beautiful to look at, with their intricate patterns and detailed shapes, they are also essential tools for science, keys to unlocking the past. By patiently studying the sequence of rock layers, paleontologists can piece together the grand timeline of Earth's history. Silurian strata reveal not just what creatures lived, but precisely when they appeared and how ecosystems profoundly changed after the great extinction that ended the Ordovician. Fossils of jawed fish, for example, show the first tentative steps toward the rise of predators that would dominate later ages. Graptolite impressions in shale record the vast swarms that once filled the oceans, each delicate line marking a fleeting moment in deep time. Together, these invaluable records allow scientists to reconstruct a living, breathing picture of a vanished age, a world reborn through stone. Walking through a Silurian limestone quarry, one might see layers stacked one upon another, each representing thousands of years of Earth's slow, patient breath. In one layer, a crinoid stem curls like a fossilized flower stalk. In another, the branching form of a coral colony spreads across the stone, a silent, ancient garden. The deeper you go, the farther back in time you travel, gently peeling away the history of the seas that once covered the continents. These fossils are not scattered at random. They are organized, each layer recording a vital chapter in the unfolding story of life. Silurian rocks are also important for understanding how Earth itself has changed over unimaginable spans of time. The chemistry locked within limestone tells us about the ancient composition of the oceans, the levels of oxygen in the air, and the subtle fluctuations of climate. Traces of volcanic ash within these rocks show when eruptions shook the seas, while layers of sediment reveal shifts in sea level. Fossils combined with chemistry allow scientists to see both the biology and the geology of the Silurian interwoven into one grand, intricate story, an inseparable tapestry. It is striking to realize how fragile and ephemeral these records are. Many fossils are small, no larger than a fingertip, yet they carry the immense weight of entire worlds, of forgotten eons. A single brachiopod shell can tell us the depth of the water it lived in, the nutrients it fed on, and the stability of its ecosystem. A stromatoporoid structure can reveal the precise location of a reef that once stretched for kilometers. Even the faint, ghostly scratches of a graptolite colony, pressed into shale, can help define the very boundaries of geological time itself. These treasures of stone do not only exist in faraway cliffs and islands, they are scattered across much of the earth, because during the Silurian, shallow seas covered large areas of the continents. Wherever those seas once lay, their fossils may still be hidden, waiting to be discovered. Quarries, cliffs, and riverbeds around the world hold fragments of the Silurian, pieces of a vast puzzle that scientists continue to assemble, patiently, meticulously. From fossils and rocks, the Silurian comes alive again, whispering its ancient secrets. The limestone preserves not just the shells of ancient creatures, but the very rhythm of ecosystems, the rise of predators, and the quiet, persistent work of reefs. These records lead us forward into the next chapter of how plants and animals reshape the world around them, turning bare stone into thriving, vibrant landscapes. The rocks of the Silurian hold the fossilized remains of ancient seas, but on land, something more subtle, yet equally profound, was beginning. Something that would eventually change the very surface of Earth forever. Small plants no taller than a human hand were slowly spreading across damp soils and rocky ground. They had no flowers, no complex leaves as we know them today, only simple stems and branching tips, a rudimentary elegance. Yet, in their quiet persistence, they were performing acts of profound ecological engineering that fundamentally reshaped the world. These fragile pioneers were the first true ecosystem builders on land, the silent architects of a green future. When a plant pressed its tenacious roots into the ground, it did more than simply hold itself upright. It broke apart rock, grain by patient grain, slowly, relentlessly creating soil. Where bare stone had once baked under the relentless sunlight, thin layers of earth began to form, darkened by organic matter, a nascent skin for the planet. In these precious patches, water lingered longer after rainfall, and vital nutrients recycled more efficiently. Each new shoot contributed to this silent transformation, making the surface less barren and more hospitable, more welcoming. What appeared to be the smallest of steps was, in truth, the meticulous laying of foundations for future forests, a cosmic blueprint. Shade was another quiet gift, an unexpected blessing. A cluster of stems, though simple in form, cast faint shadows across the soil beneath. In those shaded spaces, the ground held more moisture and stayed cooler than the exposed rock around it. That difference, though slight, created tiny, crucial habitats. Small arthropods that had just begun to test life on land could find refuge in these damp pockets, where the air held more humidity and the soil was softer underfoot, a precious haven. By merely standing upright and reaching towards the life-giving sunlight, the first plants were already subtly shaping the environments of other creatures, an unconscious act of creation. As these patches of greenery grew, so did the complexity of the land. Decaying stems and fallen spores added organic matter to the soil, enriching it further. Each cycle of growth and death enriched the ground, building layers that could support more plants, a continuous act of self-creation. With those layers came the beginnings of terrestrial nutrient cycles. Elements like nitrogen and phosphorus, once locked in inert stone or swept away into the vast ancient seas, were now moving through living tissues on land. When plants decayed, these nutrients returned to the soil, ready to be used again by the next generation of shoots. It was the start of a cycle that continues to this day, one that sustains every forest, every meadow, and every field, a timeless rhythm. The first greenery also profoundly changed the way water moved across the continents. Bare rock could not hold rain for long. It rushed away, unhindered. But roots anchored soil, slowing erosion and allowing water to seep into the ground. A gentle, unseen hand, streams ran clearer, carrying fewer sediments into the seas. This gentle control of water by plants reshaped coastlines and floodplains, creating conditions where life could spread more easily. Even the smallest stems had an influence far larger than their size suggested, softening the harshness of the continents and beginning the long transformation from barren rock to rich, vibrant landscapes. The emotional power of this shift lies in its profound quietness. Imagine a Silurian hillside, once nothing but unyielding stone and dust. Now a thin patch of green spreads across its surface, tiny plants clinging tenaciously to cracks in the rock. They cast faint ephemeral shadows, they trap precious moisture, and they create pockets of life, small oases. Insects and arthropods creep among them, taking advantage of what shelter they provide, finding refuge. Spores drift on the breeze, settling in new places where they begin the cycle again, a silent, persistent renewal. The land, once profoundly silent, now carries the first whispers of ecosystems, a nascent symphony of life. Though these plants were small, their impact reached forward into the distant future, an enduring legacy. By creating soil, they laid the groundwork for forests that would rise hundreds of millions of years later, vast green cathedrals. By cycling nutrients, they ensured that larger and more complex plants could take hold, claiming their place. By offering shade and shelter, they invited animals to explore further from the water, venturing into the unknown. These were the first steps in a chain of changes that would eventually cover Earth in vast forests, home to countless species, a tapestry of life. The story of the Silurian is often told through its oceans and reefs, but here on land, the quiet, persistent labor of plants was every bit as revolutionary, every bit as profound. They were not simply living on the continents, they were actively reshaping them, meticulously preparing the ground for what was to come. And as they worked, they were not alone. Hidden beneath their nascent roots, another powerful partnership was beginning to form, one that would amplify their power and ensure that life on land could spread even further into the very heart of the continent. As the first plants pressed their tenacious roots into cracks and began their quiet work of greening the continents, they did not perform this monumental task alone. Hidden deep in the soil around their delicate stems, invisible to the eye, another ancient form of life was subtly shaping the future of the land. These were fungi, ancient organisms that had been an integral part of Earth's ecosystems long before plants took their first tentative steps onto shore. In the Silurian, plants and fungi began to form partnerships, a profound symbiosis that would transform both groups and forever alter the very surface of the planet. Fungi possessed a special, remarkable gift. They were masters of breaking things down, the silent alchemists of decay. Their thread-like filaments, called hyphae, could penetrate unyielding stone and soil, releasing acids that patiently dissolved minerals locked within. What for plants was an immovable barrier, fungi could unravel, piece by delicate piece as they spread through the soil. These microscopic threads created vast, intricate networks that released vital nutrients, such as phosphorus and nitrogen, making them available for other organisms. Where bare rock would have starved a plant of essential resources, fungi, in their quiet persistence, turned it into a storehouse of food, a hidden treasure. Plants, in turn, provided something fungi could not make for themselves: sugars. Through the silent magic of photosynthesis, plants captured sunlight and carbon dioxide, transforming them into energy-rich compounds. By linking their nascent roots with fungal filaments, they traded some of this precious sugar in exchange for the minerals the fungi patiently gathered. This exchange was not simply beneficial, it was absolutely essential. Without it, the first vascular plants would have struggled immensely to survive on land, for their tissues alone could not reach deeply enough into stone to gather what they needed. This was the profound birth of mycorrhizal relationships, the symbiosis that still intricately binds plants and fungi together today, an ancient enduring partnership. Mycorrhizae are the vital bridges that connect roots to soil, allowing nutrients to flow in both directions, a seamless exchange. In the Silurian, they were the hidden scaffolding beneath every patch of greenery, the unseen support system. Even the tiny Cooksonia, with its simple stems and spores, likely relied on fungal partners to draw nutrients from the thin soils around it. This invisible alliance transformed fragile plants into powerful ecosystem engineers, giving them the strength and resilience to spread further across the continents, conquering new territory. Imagine a patch of Silurian shoreline where green shoots, no taller than a hand, rise from the damp ground. Beneath the surface, an entire unseen world is alive with activity. Fungal threads stretch outward like an intricate underground web, embracing grains of sand and particles of rock. They dissolve minerals, transport vital nutrients, and deliver them to the plant roots they embrace. In return, precious sugar flows back into the fungi, fueling their growth and extending their reach. Above ground, the plants stand quietly in the sunlight, a serene tableau, but beneath, the soil hums with an exchange as intricate and vital as any bustling marketplace. A silent, unseen economy of life. These partnerships all significantly accelerated the weathering of rock, speeding up the formation of soil. As fungi dissolved minerals, they helped create the fine particles that made the ground fertile. Each new layer of soil captured more water, held more nutrients, and supported more plant life. This feedback loop, once begun, grew stronger and more complex with every generation. Plants provided energy, fungi provided minerals, and together they made the land more habitable, more welcoming. It was a cycle that would eventually give rise to vast forests. But in the Silurian, it was only beginning, whispered into existence by tiny organisms working in unison, a silent, profound collaboration. Fossil evidence gently suggests that some of the earliest plant-fungal associations were already in place by the Silurian, and perhaps even earlier. Microscopic fossils show faint traces of fungal filaments inside ancient plant tissues, undeniable evidence of symbiosis nearly as old as land plants themselves. To find these intricate connections frozen in stone is to glimpse the very moment when two distinct kingdoms of life first linked their fates, forever intertwined. The importance of this partnership cannot be overstated. Alone, plants might have clung precariously to the margins of coasts, limited by poor soils and harsh conditions. Alone, fungi would have remained recyclers, breaking down matter without the energy to build complex ecosystems. Together, they created the foundational bedrock for all terrestrial life. They were not simply neighbors, they were collaborators, partners in a grand planetary experiment that would carry life from the water's edge into the very heart of the continent. As these microbial partnerships spread, they wove a hidden fabric beneath the land, an unseen foundation. Every step taken by an arthropod across the soil, every spore drifting on the wind, was made possible by this silent, powerful alliance. It was the unseen world beneath the ground that gave rise to the visible world above it, the delicate threads of fungi supporting the fragile shoots of plants, and as this alliance deepened, it meticulously prepared the land for even greater transformations, where coastlines and tidal flats would become the next frontier for expanding life, a boundless canvas awaiting its next masterpiece. At the ancient boundary where land met sea, a new world, vibrant and dynamic, was slowly taking shape. The tidal flats and shorelines of the Silurian were unlike anything we know today, profoundly alien, yet strangely familiar. These were wide, open expanses where the sea advanced and retreated in long, slow breaths, a rhythmic embrace, leaving behind vast stretches of mud that shimmered beneath the ancient sunlight. Here, life gathered at the edges, clinging tenaciously to both water and land, boldly testing the limits of what was truly possible. Muddy coastlines were among the busiest, most vibrant places in the Silurian. With every tide, sediments carried by ancient rivers and waves were spread across the shallows, forming sticky flats and ephemeral pools. These environments were incredibly rich with nutrients, stirred constantly by the relentless rhythm of the water. Small arthropods, among the very first to venture from the relative safety of the sea, scurried across the damp surfaces. Their tracks, pressed into soft mud, were fragile at the moment of their making. Yet some survived long enough to be preserved in stone, leaving us faint, ghostly records of the earliest animal steps on land, a profound testament to courage. Millipede-like creatures with many tiny legs crawled among decaying plant matter, while smaller invertebrates wriggled in the shallow pools, thriving in the microhabitats that the tides meticulously created. It was here, too, that plants played an absolutely vital role. Without their presence, the tides would have swept nascent soil away, stripping coasts back to bare, unyielding rock. The earliest vascular plants, anchored firmly into the ground, held the soil together, a silent, protective embrace. Their stems, simple and leafless though they were, created resistance against the water's relentless pull. In places where green patches grew, mud was not so easily washed away. Instead, it accumulated, thickened, and built up new layers for more life to settle. Each tide left something behind, and each plant rooted those sediments in place, slowly transforming coastlines into environments that could sustain more complexity, more life. The imagery of these tidal flats is striking, almost poetic. Imagine standing at the edge of a Silurian sea, the horizon glowing under a warm, ancient sunlight. As the water retreats, it leaves behind a landscape of glistening mud, patterned with subtle ripples and dotted with shallow pools. Among them, small green shoots rise in clusters, their fragile stems trembling in the breeze. Between these shoots, tiny arthropods creep, their segmented bodies leaving delicate trails in the wet ground. The scene is quiet, yet profoundly alive with subtle motion, the first delicate attempts of life to master the precarious space between sea and land. These coastal zones were also crucial nurseries of resilience. Organisms that survived here learned to endure relentless cycles of flooding and exposure, saltwater and fresh rainfall, wetness and dryness. For plants, it meant evolving stronger tissues that could resist drying under the harsh sunlight. For arthropods, it meant finding ingenious ways to breathe in open air, even if only for short periods of time. The tidal flats forced life to adapt quickly, offering both boundless opportunity and profound danger. Those that succeeded in this harsh, dynamic environment paved the way for more ambitious colonization of the continents in the ages to come, a testament to evolutionary grit. What made these habitats especially important was the sheer variety of microenvironments they contained. Pools of standing water, sheltered larvae, and small invertebrates. Channels carved by tides created shifting, ephemeral landscapes of silt and sand. Patches of anchored plants stabilized one area while leaving another exposed. The result was a patchwork of habitats, each one offering a different chance for survival, a diverse array of opportunities. Even in their simplicity, tidal flats and shorelines encouraged profound diversity, acting as vital gateways between the abundant richness of the sea and the quiet emptiness of the land. The emotional weight of this moment in Earth's history lies in its inherent fragility. Life was still clinging to the edges, hesitant to step too far inland. Every footprint in the mud was temporary, ephemeral. Every spore carried on the wind was uncertain, a gamble. Yet, together, they marked a quiet, profound determination. The green shoots and creeping arthropods on Silurian shorelines were small, but they were opening doors to futures far larger than themselves, an unseen potential. As these coastlines stabilized and expanded, they gave rise to calmer seas and clearer waters, where reefs could flourish in even greater abundance. The world was moving steadily toward a new balance, each new contribution of land and sea building upon the last, a slow, patient construction. The Silurian world was, at its heart, one of water. Warmth filled the ancient atmosphere, and the seas swelled higher than in many ages before, a gentle cosmic breath. Continents, still small and scattered compared to those of today, were partly drowned beneath shallow oceans that stretched inland for great distances. Vast portions of land were submerged under warm, sunlit waters, creating broad continental shelves where reefs and tidal ecosystems could truly thrive, bustling with life. High sea levels were the natural outcome of a greenhouse-like climate, a warm embrace. Glaciers that had once gripped the earth during the violent end of the Ordovician were gone, melted back into the oceans, raising them across the globe. With ice largely absent from the poles, the seas filled every low basin, pressing against the edges of continents, reclaiming ancient territories. The planet was wrapped in warmth, and this pervasive warmth gave the Silurian its distinctive gentle character. Unlike the ages before it, the Silurian did not swing wildly between extremes of heat and ice. Instead, it was a rare, precious calm interval, a profound pause in Earth's restless rhythm, where life gathered strength before its next leap. The climate was steady, stable enough that ecosystems could expand without constant collapse. Corals built reefs that lasted for millions of years. Plants spread further inland without the sudden, catastrophic threat of global freezes. Animals tested life at the water's edge in an environment that gave them time to adapt, to evolve. It was not a world without challenges, but compared to the tumult of earlier ages, it was unusually gentle, unusually nurturing. This stability can be imagined as a long, shallow breath in the history of the planet. For countless ages before, Earth had lurched violently between catastrophe and recovery, a relentless cycle. The Ordovician had ended in one of the deadliest extinctions, driven by ice and sudden warming. Before that, in the Cambrian, life had exploded in a frenzy of innovation, filling the seas with new forms as quickly as many of them disappeared, a chaotic, vibrant burst. The Silurian, in contrast, was slower, more measured. It was a time when balance held, a delicate equilibrium, allowing fragile experiments to succeed, to take root. The high seas of the Silurian created habitats that were both vast and incredibly rich. Warm, shallow waters stretched over continental shelves, bathed in sunlight that penetrated deep into the water, a golden embrace. These environments were ideal for reef-building organisms, for filter feeders, and for early fish that patrolled the open waters. With the seas stable, ecosystems grew more interconnected, weaving stronger, more intricate chains of life. Diversity increased, not in sudden bursts but in steady layers, like sediments quietly settling on the seafloor, building upon each other. For animals living at the time, this calm climate meant boundless opportunity. Predators could specialize in their hunting strategies, becoming more efficient, while prey species developed defenses at a pace that matched the challenges they faced. Plants expanded inland, in slow but persistent waves, undisturbed by catastrophic climate swings. Arthropods could crawl further from shore, knowing that the conditions would not change overnight. In this profound way, stability fostered innovation, not through chaos but through patience, through a gentle, persistent unfolding. The imagery of the Silurian seas is one of immense expansiveness. Imagine looking out over an ocean that glitters beneath a steady sunlight, its surface calm and warm. Instead of towering ice sheets at the poles, waves roll unhindered from one horizon to the next, a boundless expanse. The land is reduced to islands and narrow continents fringed with reefs and lagoons. Shallow seas stretch across regions that today are far inland, their waters filled with corals, fish, and drifting colonies of graptolites. The earth breathes softly, and in that softness, life finds abundant room to grow, to flourish. This rare calm did not mean stillness. The planet's crust continued to move. Volcanoes still erupted, and species still faced the relentless pressures of survival. Yet the background rhythm was steady. The stage was set not for extinction but for expansion, for growth. The Silurian stands out in deep time because of this profound balance. It was not an age defined by disaster or sudden revolution, but by the quiet consolidation of progress already begun, a silent strengthening. It was a bridge, gracefully linking the violent upheavals of earlier ages with the dramatic expansions that would come in the Devonian. From the stability of the climate and the generosity of the seas, life gained strength, ecosystems grew more intricate, food chains lengthened, and the first whispers of forests deepened their roots and soil. In this calm world, the groundwork was laid for transformations that would reach far beyond the Silurian. And as balance held, plants themselves were changing, developing new features that allowed them to rise taller, spread wider, and shape the landscapes in even more profound ways, transforming the very face of the earth. In the quiet calm of the Silurian world, plants began to attempt something truly extraordinary, a daring feat. Until this point, the pioneers that had crept onto land were simple, low to the ground, and fragile against the relentless elements. They lay close to the damp soils, tethered to moisture, and unable to stretch very far from their watery origins. But deep within their tiny, unassuming bodies, new innovations were forming. Subtle yet revolutionary innovations that would completely reshape Earth's nascent landscapes, turning barren rock into verdant realms. The first great step, the foundational leap, was the development of vascular tissue. This was a delicate, intricate system of internal channels, almost like thin, hidden threads, that allowed water and vital nutrients to be carried upward through the plant, defying gravity's pull. Before vascular tissue, a plant could only stay alive where it touched wet ground, its cells absorbing moisture directly from the surface, much like a sponge. This inherent limitation kept them small, forcing them to hug the soil, forever bound to dampness. With vascular tissue, plants gained the astonishing ability to move water from roots to stems, and nutrients from the soil to nascent leaves. It was like building a hidden plumbing system inside their fragile green bodies, opening a vertical pathway to new unprecedented heights. As these internal channels evolved, plants no longer had to sprawl flat across the earth. They could lift themselves up, pushing tiny stems into the air, reaching with quiet determination towards the life-giving sunlight. Even a few centimeters of extra height meant a profound difference in survival and opportunity. Light was more easily captured. Spores could be carried further by the whispering wind, scattering wider, and competition for space began in a new, vertical dimension. The earth, once quiet and bare, now held the beginnings of structure, a nascent architecture of life. Small, upright stalks dotted the edges of waterlogged ground, fragile but determined, like tiny green sentinels. One of the most important early forms was Cooksonia, a plant so small it could be held between two fingers, yet so significant it marks one of the greatest leaps in life's history. Its stems were little more than green tubes, only a few centimeters high, ending in tiny capsules that released spores. But those tubes contained the revolutionary vascular tissue that made all larger plants possible, the hidden blueprint for future giants. In Cooksonia, the majestic story of towering forests and endless grasslands had its first quiet chapter. Its presence in the Silurian landscape was like the opening sketch of a masterpiece that would take millions of years to complete. A grand, slow unfolding. With vascular tissue came another profound change: the ability to branch. Instead of a single stalk rising into the air, plants began to divide their stems, sending out forks and splits. This may seem simple, but it multiplied their possibilities exponentially. Branching allowed plants to spread more spores, to reach into different angles of sunlight, and to create a broader, more stable structure that could resist strong winds. Each division was like a choice, an experiment in form, a quiet exploration of architectural design. Some branches grew upward, some outward, and these nascent patterns would eventually give rise to the complex, intricate architecture of future trees. In the Silurian, however, it was only the beginning, a delicate testing of new designs, a first draft of the arboreal world. Imagine a shoreline dotted with these first branching plants, their thin stalks swaying gently with the breeze. They were not yet forests, not even meadows, but the profound hint of them was undeniably there. Where once there had only been flat mosses or simple liverwort-like plants, now small, upright forms began to catch the eye. They rose above the ground just enough to cast faint ephemeral shadows, the very first shade to fall upon the continents, a silent, precious gift. The impact of these innovations spread far beyond the plants themselves, rippling through the nascent ecosystems. By lifting higher, they exposed more of their surfaces to the air, which significantly increased the exchange of gases. Photosynthesis, already transforming the atmosphere, accelerated its life-giving work. Oxygen seeped more steadily into the skies, enriching the air, and carbon dioxide was drawn down into the tissues of stems and roots. A silent sequestration. With vascular systems, plants could extend their reach further inland, no longer confined to the damp edges of waterlogged flats. Soil began to form where roots burrowed, and the rhythm of nutrient cycles deepened, becoming more complex, more robust. The Silurian world was still sparse, its continents quiet and lonely, a canvas largely untouched. But these small stems represented an unfolding promise, a profound potential. They were fragile, yet persistent, and with each generation, they tested new solutions. Taller growth, stronger tissues, more intricate branching patterns, more efficient transport systems. Each change slowly, patiently building the foundation for what would later become towering forests, vast, green cathedrals of life. From here, the story of plants would continue to expand, and with it, new possibilities for life. Animals that crawled from the seas would find shelter in their nascent shade. The soils they built would anchor entire ecosystems. The air they altered would make breathing easier for creatures still waiting to appear. But in these early moments, the revolution was measured in centimeters, in the quiet, determined rise of green stems against barren rock. And as these first vascular plants reached higher into the Silurian sunlight, the stage was being meticulously set for food chains more intricate and balanced than ever before. A grand, unseen design unfolding. Life has always been bound by the quiet, immutable rules of energy. To exist, every creature must draw power from somewhere, whether from the sun's life-giving light, from the minerals locked in ancient stone, or from the bodies of other living things. In the Silurian world, this delicate balance of energy began to take on new depth, new complexity, intricately weaving together the earliest complex food chains that would eventually support entire ecosystems, a hidden tapestry of survival. At the very base of this new, emergent structure were the producers, organisms capable of capturing sunlight and transforming its raw energy into food. In the boundless oceans, algae bloomed in endless variety, a vibrant, microscopic garden. Tiny single-celled forms floated near the surface, their green bodies shimmering in the filtered sunlight. Larger types grew in mats along the seafloor, creating carpets of life in shallow bays. Each of these algae pulled carbon dioxide from the water and released oxygen in return, a vital trade that slowly shifted the chemistry of both air and sea. On land, the very first plants joined this crucial role as producers. They were small and fragile, no taller than a human hand, but they carried out the same quiet, fundamental work by anchoring themselves into shallow soils and raising tiny green stems to the light. They expanded the reach of photosynthesis onto the continents, a new frontier. For the first time, sunlight falling on dry ground could be stored in living tissue, a profound act of creation. These modest plants joined algae in forming the indispensable base of a food web that would stretch upward into animals, predators, and eventually the colossal giants of later ages, a grand pyramid of life. Consumers emerged to take advantage of this new wealth of energy, this burgeoning abundance. In the seas, arthropods of every imaginable shape filled the diverse niches of grazers, scavengers, and hunters. Trilobites still crept along the bottoms, their segmented bodies patiently searching for food in the sediment, an ancient rhythm, while newly evolved eurypterids patrolled shallow waters with formidable claws and paddles, asserting themselves as the powerful rulers of their realms. Smaller arthropods sifted through algae and detritus, linking the base of the food web to higher levels, creating intricate connections. Fish too had entered the scene, a new force. Jawless varieties swam in schools, filtering particles or scraping algae from surfaces, a gentle, passive feeding. Above them, placoderms and acanthodians, armored and spiny, introduced predation of a new dynamic kind. With jaws came the astonishing ability to bite, to grasp, to shred. For the first time in Earth's history, fish actively hunted fish, layering complexity into the food chains of the sea, a silent, relentless arms race. Prey and predator became locked in a perpetual cycle of adaptation, each shaping the other as evolution tested countless forms, a dance of life and death. On land, the consumers were fewer but no less significant. The earliest arthropods, likely millipede-like creatures, fed on decaying plant matter and microbial mats, patiently recycling nutrients back into the nascent soil. These small foragers were among the first animals to take advantage of the energy stored in terrestrial plants. Though tiny, their role was immense. They connected the new green producers of land to the greater cycles of life, ensuring that energy could move through soil, plants, and animals in intricate patterns that would one day support vast forests and entire complex ecosystems. With producers anchoring the base and consumers linking each level above, the Silurian world began to stabilize in ways it had not before. Energy flowed in continuous cycles, from sunlight to plant, from plant to grazer, from grazer to predator, and then back again through decay. Microbes broke down the remains of plants and animals, returning vital nutrients to soil and water where they could be used again by algae and roots. A perfect, self-sustaining loop. This recycling of matter and energy intricately tied the entire system together, creating resilience where there had once been fragility and nascent strength. The establishment of these intricate food chains gave the Silurian seas and lands a profound sense of structure, almost like invisible architecture, holding life in place. Each creature, no matter how small, played a vital part in keeping the cycle turning, a silent, collective effort. Algae sustained tiny grazers, which in turn nourished fish, which fed larger predators, and all were eventually broken down to fuel the cycle anew. On land, the first plants, arthropods, and microbes were weaving a similar, though smaller pattern. These quiet exchanges of energy may seem simple, but they marked a profound turning point. In earlier ages, ecosystems were often disrupted by extremes, by sudden violent shifts in climate or chemistry. In the Silurian, the weaving together of producers, consumers, and decomposers created a more stable, more predictable rhythm. The seas no longer belonged only to scattered survivors of extinction. They thrived with diversity intricately tied together in vast networks of energy and interaction. This stability would carry forward into later ages, laying the indispensable foundation for explosions of life to come. For now, in the Silurian, it was enough that algae sparkled in the sunlit waters, that small plants stretched on land, and that arthropods and fish danced through a web of survival, more intricate than any that had existed before. Out of these delicate beginnings, the blueprint of modern ecosystems was being written, one intricate strand of energy at a time. The Silurian may seem like an age lost to the profound depths of deep time, a distant echo, yet its story is still indelibly written in stone, preserved in delicate fossils that miraculously survived hundreds of millions of years. These remnants are precious windows, not only into the forms of long extinct creatures, but into the vibrant landscapes they shaped and the ancient seas they inhabited. Some of the most remarkable of these windows lie in places that today look calm and ordinary, pastoral and serene. Yet, beneath the surface of their cliffs and quarries lies an ancient hidden record of life from a world before trees, a time unimaginable to us now. One such place is Wenlock Edge, a long limestone ridge that gracefully cuts across the English countryside. On the surface, it is quiet, cloaked in greenery and dotted with farmland, but hidden within its very rocks is a frozen reef from nearly 420 million years ago, a geological time capsule. Here, entire communities are preserved, corals locked in their ancient growth positions, stromatoporoids layered like old masonry, and shells of brachiopods still clinging to the places where they once lived. Frozen in their final embrace, the fossils reveal reefs teeming with life, standing tall in warm Silurian seas before forests had ever appeared on land, a vibrant, submerged world. Walking along the ridge today is like strolling through the silent ruins of an ancient underwater city, its streets built of limestone, its inhabitants immortalized in stone. Further north, across the shimmering waters of the Baltic Sea, lies the island of Gotland in Sweden. Its cliffs are world famous for the Silurian fossils embedded within them, and for good reason. The island itself is built from ancient reef systems, their intricate structure still visible in the exposed rock faces. Corals bloom in fossil form across the stone like petrified gardens, silent and enduring. Nautiloid shells coil across the layers, their elegant spirals still clear despite the immense ages, a testament to enduring form. In certain spots, one can even trace the delicate, ghostly outlines of graptolites, small colonial creatures that floated freely in the ancient oceans, their tiny forms leaving ethereal impressions in the shale. Gotland holds one of the richest records of Silurian life anywhere on Earth, and through it, scientists can reconstruct not just the individual creatures, but the entire complex ecosystems that sustained them, a vibrant, interconnected web. The profound beauty of these fossils lies not only in their intricate shapes, but in what they represent. The corals, delicate yet resilient, show how reef building surged after the devastation of the Ordovician extinction, covering the seas with new burgeoning life. The shells of brachiopods and mollusks tell of seabeds busy with grazers and filter feeders, creatures that recycled nutrients and sustained the intricate food web. Even the armored plates of early fish can sometimes be found, hinting at the dawn of new, powerful predators. In every limestone slab lies a silent record of survival, recovery, and growth, a poignant story told in stone. What makes the Silurian fossil record especially haunting is what it profoundly lacks. Among the corals and shells, there are no traces of trees, no imprints of ferns, no discernible evidence of towering plants. The land was still bare, a vast, empty canvas. The fossils speak of a world where all the richness, all the vibrant life was contained within the seas, while the continents stood silent and empty, waiting. It is a powerful reminder that the balance of Earth was once very different, that the green landscapes we know today were still only whispers on the distant horizon. Through these fossils, scientists can also piece together the subtle rhythms of the Silurian climate and sea levels. Layers of limestone and shale alternate, marking cycles of rising and falling seas, of reefs flourishing and then being gently drowned by deeper waters. Within the intricate patterns of coral growth and extinction, paleontologists trace the long, slow breathing of the planet, the subtle changes that shaped where life could thrive. Wenlock Edge and Gotland are not just collections of ancient shells, they are records of Earth's pulse, its slow, patient heartbeat across deep time. The fossils also offer a profound sense of scale. To hold a fragment of stromatoporoid coral in hand is to touch something that grew when land was still barren and silent, an ancient artifact. To see a trilobite fossil embedded in limestone is to glimpse an animal that scuttled along seafloors long before vertebrates walked on land. Each fossil is both fragile and enduring, a small survivor carrying the immense memory of an entire age. In this way, Silurian fossils remind us of how profoundly the world has changed. The reefs they preserve are older than trees, older than forests, older than grass. They belong to a chapter of Earth's history when oceans ruled the planet and life was still hesitating at the edges of land. And yet, through these enduring remnants, we can still see the beauty, the resilience, and the astonishing complexity of a world that came before, a world etched in stone. The oceans of the Silurian were both familiar and profoundly strange. If you could step into them, the water would feel much the same, salty and full of life, a comforting embrace, yet the scenes around you would reveal a world very different from today's seas. These oceans were warm, shallow in many places, and beautifully lit by sunlight that reached easily to the seabed. A vibrant, underwater glow, they were seas of immense promise, but also of inherent fragility, holding the nascent beginnings of ecosystems that were still finding their delicate balance. The reefs of the Silurian stood as the beating hearts of these oceans, their vibrant epicenters, built not only by corals, but also by stromatoporoids, sponge-like organisms with stony skeletons that layered themselves into great resilient mounds. These reefs rose into structures taller than houses, sprawling across vast areas, true underwater cities. They were different from the reefs we know today, which are mostly formed by stony corals alone. Silurian reefs were more experimental, more diverse, patchworks of creatures building side by side, weaving their skeletons into strong, intricate fortresses. Within their cracks and hollows, fish, mollusks, and arthropods found essential shelter, while filter feeders clustered to strain food from the passing currents. A constant, vital harvest. These reefs were bustling oases, yet they carried an air of delicacy, of fragile grace. They grew in stable conditions, but were vulnerable to even small changes in the environment, relying on a delicate balance that could easily tip. Modern coral reefs, by comparison, are more specialized and complex, built by countless generations of corals, working in tight, symbiotic partnerships with the algae inside their tissues. Today's reefs host vibrant colors and an enormous variety of life, from schools of tropical fish to majestic sea turtles and powerful sharks. The reefs of the Silurian were quieter, less crowded, a more serene landscape, yet they were just as vital, for they were the first large underwater cities, the foundational prototypes upon which future, more complex ecosystems would be built. What strikes the imagination most about the Silurian seas is not simply what was there, but what was profoundly missing. In today's oceans, large vertebrates dominate the scene. Whales sing across entire basins, their calls echoing through the depths. Schools of tuna move like shimmering silver storms, and sharks patrol with effortless power and grace. In the Silurian, there were no whales, no dolphins, no sea turtles. Even sharks were only just beginning to appear in their most primitive forms, mere hints of their future power. The largest predators were not fish at all, but arthropods, the great sea scorpions, whose clawed arms and paddle-like limbs made them formidable rulers of the shallows. Placoderms, the armored-jawed fish, were among the first vertebrate hunters, but they were still small compared to the giants that would follow in later ages. This profound absence of large vertebrates gave the Silurian seas a different rhythm, a unique pulse. Predation was undeniably present, yet on a smaller scale, more intimate. Ecosystems relied more heavily on invertebrates, with trilobites, mollusks, and brachiopods filling roles that would later be taken over by more advanced fish and marine reptiles. Energy moved through food chains in a simpler, more direct way, with algae and plankton at the base, filter feeders above them, and arthropods and small fish as the main predators. Without the heavy dominant presence of large animals, these food webs were inherently fragile, more easily disrupted by changes in climate or sea level. The fragility of Silurian ecosystems is clear in the fossil record. Reefs grew during times of stability, but they collapsed when seas deepened or when conditions shifted. Recovery could take millions of years, and during those times, life in the oceans thinned out, becoming sparse until balance returned. It was a time when the resilience we take for granted today had not yet been fully built. The webs of life were intricate, but not yet strong, as if the seas themselves were still practicing for the complexities that would come later, honing their craft. Still, there was a profound beauty in this simplicity. To drift through a Silurian reef would be to float among spiny corals and branching stromatoporoids, to watch small armored fish glint in the light, and to see colonies of graptolites drifting like lacework in the water. The seas shimmered with potential, every species an experiment, every ecosystem a fragile sketch of what oceans could one day become. As the Silurian gave way to later ages, the oceans would only grow louder, faster, and more crowded. But here in this ancient time, the seas carried a gentler rhythm, marked by smaller creatures, delicate partnerships, and ecosystems that were as breakable as they were beautiful. And while they may seem alien compared to the oceans we know, these Silurian seas laid the indispensable foundations for all that followed. The continents of the Silurian stretched out in long, low shapes, their surfaces quiet under the warmth of ancient sunlight. Much of the land was bare, the rock worn smooth by ceaseless wind and weather, broken here and there by shallow valleys, filled with silt from rivers that trickled down from new, nascent mountains. Against this vastness, the first tentative touches of green appeared, but they were so small and scattered that from a distance they might have gone utterly unnoticed. Tiny patches of moss clung to damp cracks in the stone. Liverwort-like plants spread across sheltered corners of tidal flats. Coccinea, one of the earliest vascular plants, stood no higher than a finger, lifting its simple stalk toward the sky, a fragile sentinel. Together they formed little islands of life, like green freckles on the surface of an otherwise lifeless continent. If we could walk across this ancient landscape, the silence would feel heavy, almost oppressive. There would be no rustle of leaves overhead, no vibrant bird calls, no insistent buzz of insects. The air would be still, broken only by the sound of wind moving over rock or the gentle splash of waves, where the sea lapped against the land. These were not yet the continents we know, vibrant and alive with forests, rivers, and animals. There were places of waiting, as though the land itself was holding its breath for the life that was only beginning to tentatively arrive. In some spots, the soil was just starting to form, a nascent skin for the planet. Roots reached into cracks, patiently splitting stone into powder, mixing it with organic material from decaying plants. In these thin pockets of earth, the green patches grew a little denser, holding on more firmly against the wind, yet most of the land remained raw and exposed, too dry and harsh for anything more than the smallest shoots to survive, a testament to its unforgiving nature. The contrast between the vibrant ocean and the silent land was striking, almost jarring. Offshore, reefs built by corals and stromatoporoids were bustling, alive with fish, arthropods, and mollusks. On land, in comparison, the world was almost entirely empty. To our eyes used to landscapes filled with color and movement, the Silurian continents would have seemed profoundly lonely, a vast emptiness. Imagine standing on a broad plain of bare rock, with only a few dark green clumps scattered here and there, each no bigger than a rug. The horizon would stretch unbroken, without the canopy of trees or the shelter of shrubs. There were no forests to soften the land, no grass to ripple in the wind, no flowers to paint the ground with color. The silence would press in from all sides, broken only by the whisper of air across stone, a haunting lullaby. Yet within this profound stillness was immense possibility. Each green patch was a foothold, a promise of what was to come. The mosses and tiny vascular plants were not impressive in size, but their presence was revolutionary, a silent, powerful rebellion. They were beginning the long, painstaking work of transforming the continents from barren wastelands into environments capable of supporting larger, more complex life. By anchoring soil and releasing oxygen, they laid down the first threads of a tapestry that would eventually cover the land in forests, a grand, green vision. It is hard not to imagine what these early landscapes would one day become. The same rocks that bore only scattered moss in the Silurian would millions of years later support towering trees and dense ecosystems filled with insects, amphibians, and reptiles. The contrast could not be sharper, a testament to the power of evolution. What was once silent and empty would one day resound with the calls of animals, the hum of insects, and the roar of rivers cutting through thick vegetation. But here in the Silurian, all of that was still in the future, a distant dream. The land was sparse, waiting for life to take hold more firmly. The first whispers of green had appeared, but they had not yet grown into the chorus that would come in the Devonian, when true forests would spread across the continents. For now the Earth's landscapes were quiet, almost lonely, but beneath that quiet surface, the foundations for everything that followed were already being meticulously set. The Silurian stretches across more than 20 million years of Earth's history, a considerable span of deep time. Yet, when compared to the explosive, dramatic moments that came before and after, it feels almost quiet, a whispered chapter. The Cambrian had dazzled with sudden bursts of new life, a grand, chaotic explosion, creatures with strange bodies and unfamiliar forms appearing as if out of nowhere, filling the oceans with endless experiments in survival, a primordial frenzy. Later, the Devonian would roar with energy as fish diversified into powerful predators, vast forests spread across the continents, and the first vertebrates pulled themselves onto land, a vibrant, noisy crescendo. The Silurian sits gracefully between them, not empty but slower, steadier, like a profound pause in Earth's rhythm, where life gathered its strength before its next magnificent leap. This age often feels like a waiting room, a span of time where profound changes were happening, but on a subtler, more patient scale. Plants had begun to appear on land, but they were small and sparse, covering only fragile patches of rock and nascent soil. Animals had not yet joined them in great numbers, so the continents remained largely silent, a vast, expectant stage. In the oceans, reefs grew, fish developed jaws, and arthropods thrived. Yet even these steps seemed more like gentle progress than dramatic, sudden transformation. It was an age of meticulous preparation, a steady laying of foundations that would allow later revolutions, more flamboyant and visible, to unfold. To imagine the Silurian is to see the stark contrast between Earth's great moments of upheaval. In the Cambrian, diversity exploded in a geological instant, filling seas with trilobites, early mollusks, and the first vertebrates. Life had raced forward, experimenting with eyes, shells, and skeletons, a creative burst. In the Devonian, change accelerated again, as vast forests rose to dominate the land, and fish transformed into amphibians that would one day give rise to reptiles, birds, and mammals. By comparison, the Silurian seemed slower, more deliberate, as though life was catching its breath after the devastation of the Ordovician extinction and quietly building the intricate pieces that would power the next surge forward. The oceans reveal this patient pace most clearly. Reefs grew larger and more complex than ever before, yet the animals within them were small compared to later giants. Placoderms, the armored-jawed fish, were a new and important presence, but they had not yet reached the great sizes they would in the Devonian. Trilobites, once dominant, were dwindling while arthropods like sea scorpions prowled the shallows, clinging to their ancient dominion. It was a time of steady diversification, of species adjusting to new roles, of ecosystems expanding but not yet reaching the explosive abundance that was just around the corner. On land, the feeling of patience was even more striking. Plants had begun to alter the face of the continents, but they were still low to the ground, fragile and scattered. They had not yet built the deep soils that would support towering trees. Insects and other arthropods had made their first cautious steps ashore, but vertebrates were still confined to the water. bound by their ancient origins. The silence of these landscapes, broken only by the whisper of wind over bare rock and the faint rustle of mosses, reflected the unhurried pace of this era. It was as if the land was being carefully prepared, the canvas primed for the forests and animals that would soon transform it. A grand, slow artistry. The Silurian reminds us that evolution does not always move in dramatic bursts, in sudden, violent leaps. Sometimes it proceeds in quiet, deliberate steps, each one small, yet together reshaping the world in profound ways. The rise of vascular plants, the appearance of jaws, the growth of reefs, and the slow stabilization of the climate were not spectacular in themselves, but they laid the indispensable groundwork for all that followed. Without these steady advances, the revolutions of the Devonian could never have occurred. In this way, the Silurian was a vital bridge. Behind it lay chaos, a world devastated by mass extinction and reshaped by the sudden rise of complex life. Ahead of it waited abundance, an earth crowded with forests, rivers alive with fish, and land ready to welcome the first four-legged pioneers. The Silurian carried the planet across this immense gulf, steadying the balance, strengthening the systems, and patiently setting the stage for what was to come, a silent, cosmic preparation. And as the continents waited in silence, and the oceans thrived with quiet progress, the story of life moved forward, step by patient step, toward the next great transformation. The Silurian may seem like a quiet chapter when compared to the explosive changes of the Cambrian or the Devonian, yet its legacy is permanent and profoundly etched into the very fabric of our world. It was in this age that the Earth began its slow, deliberate journey toward becoming the green, vibrant world we know today. The first plants may have been small and fragile, almost insignificant, but their presence marked a turning point that could never be undone. Once life had taken root on land, the continents would never again return to silence, to barren emptiness. The greening of the continents began with scattered patches of mosses, liverwort-like plants, and simple vascular shoots. They clung tenaciously to damp cracks in the rocks, spread across muddy shorelines, and slowly crept inland as they adapted to drier conditions. What began as thin carpets of green soon became the foundation of an ecological revolution, a silent, persistent uprising. By capturing sunlight and drawing carbon dioxide from the air, these plants began to subtly alter the very chemistry of the atmosphere. They were small in size, but their impact stretched across the entire planet, a global transformation. One of the most enduring gifts of the Silurian was the creation of soil. Before plants, the continents were covered in bare rock and dust, surfaces that could not support complex life. When roots grew into stone, they patiently pried it apart, grinding it into smaller pieces. As plants died and decayed, their remains mixed with this mineral dust, creating the first thin soils. Over time, these soils deepened, becoming rich with nutrients that could support larger and more complex plants. In this way, the Silurian laid down the foundational groundwork for the forests that would rise in later ages. The silent architects of green, without this first crucial step, the land could never have supported the vibrant ecosystems that followed. The development of soil also reshaped the flow of water. Across the continents, bare rock allowed rain to rush away quickly, carving valleys and washing precious nutrients into the sea. Soil held the water for longer, slowing erosion and creating more stable environments. Streams and rivers began to cut gentler paths, and pockets of wetlands appeared where plants and microorganisms thrived together, a nascent, intricate dance of life. These changes were small at first, but over millions of years they transformed the face of the continents, giving rise to landscapes that could support forests, animals, and entire complex food webs. At the same time, plants expanded the cycles of oxygen that sustain life even now. Through the silent magic of photosynthesis, they released oxygen into the atmosphere in greater amounts than ever before. Algae in the oceans had already been producing oxygen for hundreds of millions of years, but the addition of plants on land tipped the balance, raising oxygen levels slowly but steadily, breathing new life into the air. This profound change did more than simply refresh the air. It allowed for larger and more active animals to evolve, a prerequisite for future complexity. Every breath taken by creatures today, including us, carries with it the indelible legacy of those first plants that drew in carbon and gave out oxygen under the Silurian sunlight. This age also began the long, intricate relationship between plants and climate stability. By absorbing carbon dioxide, plants helped regulate the greenhouse effect, balancing the warmth of the Earth's surface. This early regulation was not perfect, not fully refined, but it set in motion a process that has continued ever since. The vital link between plants, soils, and climate was forged in these quiet millions of years, a profound connection that still governs the health and balance of the planet. The Silurians' legacy is everywhere we look. If we only take the time to see every majestic tree that shades a forest floor, every delicate blade of grass in a sun-dappled meadow, every garden soil that crumbles softly between our fingers, owes its existence to the first plants that took hold on bare rock so long ago, the oxygen that fills our lungs, the intricate cycles of nutrients that feed animals and people alike, the profound stability that allows complex life to flourish, all trace back to the fragile green pioneers of this forgotten age. From a distance, the Silurian may appear to have been slow, a time of small steps rather than dramatic leaps. Yet it was in this quiet pace that permanence was built. The greening of the continents, the creation of soil, and the expansion of oxygen were not fleeting experiments. They were permanent transformations that reshaped the Earth forever, laying the indispensable foundations for all that would follow. And as the Silurian came to a close, the stage was meticulously set for a louder, more crowded world. The Devonian would soon see forests rising high, rivers filled with fish, and the first vertebrates pulling themselves onto land. But behind it all, the quiet revolution of the Silurian remained, steady and enduring, the silent architect of the green earth we call home. When we look back to the Silurian, it is easy to see it as a distant and alien chapter of Earth's story, a time of small plants and quiet seas, of creatures that no longer roam our world. Yet, its profound lessons are still with us, woven into the fabric of the present. What unfolded then continues to echo in the delicate balance of the planet today. The first plants that spread across the land did more than simply turn rock into soil or release oxygen into the air. They began to stabilize Earth's climate, creating the long feedback loops that regulate temperature and atmosphere by drawing carbon dioxide from the air and locking it into the ground. They softened the intensity of greenhouse conditions. This quiet process, repeated countless times in countless tiny shoots, subtly shifted the balance of the planet towards stability, towards a more gentle rhythm. It reminds us that even small changes, multiplied across vast spans of time, can profoundly alter the fate of the entire world. Modern science shows us just how important that early lesson was. Plants remain one of the greatest regulators of the atmosphere. Forests, grasslands, and wetlands absorb carbon, breathe out oxygen, and influence rainfall and temperature. When plants thrive, they cool and balance the planet. When they disappear, as through deforestation or climate disruption, that delicate balance falters. The Silurian teaches us that the greening of Earth was not a one-time event, but an ongoing responsibility, a perpetual stewardship. The cycles begun then still depend on living systems to keep them steady, to maintain their ancient rhythm. The oceans of the Silurian offer another profound lesson. Reefs built by corals and stromatoporoids became hubs of resilience, binding together ecosystems and creating safe spaces for diversity to flourish. Even when surrounding environments shifted, reefs provided a measure of stability, giving life the chance to recover and adapt. Today, reefs still serve this crucial role, though they are built by different architects. Modern coral reefs harbor a quarter of all marine life, creating nurseries for fish, buffering shorelines against waves, and maintaining the health of entire seas. The Silurian reefs remind us that such structures are not just beautiful, but absolutely essential. Without them, oceans lose both stability and richness. There is also something deeply humbling in how slowly the Silurian unfolded. The first plants were no taller than a finger. The first arthropods on land left only faint trails in mud, and the first fish with jaws were small compared to what would follow. Yet, these tiny, patient steps reshape the Earth in ways more permanent than any sudden explosion of life. It is a powerful reminder that change does not always arrive with drama or violence. Sometimes it is quiet, patient and steady, yet no less powerful in its transformative effect. Our own world, facing rapid change today, can learn from this ancient truth. Even the smallest adjustments, whether in ecosystems or in human choices, can ripple outward across centuries, shaping futures unimaginable. The Silurian also shows how resilience is built layer by layer, brick by patient brick. Plants anchored soil, fungi deepened a cycle of nutrients, reefs gathered diversity into networks of survival, and oxygen slowly filled the air. Each step by itself seems small, but together they created the conditions for forests, animals, and eventually humans. In our own age, resilience may depend on similar layering, on protecting ecosystems, restoring balance, and allowing small, deliberate steps to accumulate into something greater, something enduring. The forgotten world of the Silurian carries with it a message that feels timeless and profoundly relevant. Earth has always found ways to heal and stabilize itself, often through the quiet, persistent work of its smallest inhabitants. The greening of continents, the building of reefs, and the first steady cycles of oxygen and carbon all began not with giants, not with thunderous roars, but with delicate pioneers, with quiet whispers. They remind us that the foundations of life are fragile, and that safeguarding them is essential to the planet's enduring balance. And so the lessons of the Silurian are not locked away in stone. They live on in the forests that cool our atmosphere, in the reefs that shelter our seas, and in the knowledge that even the tiniest steps forward can alter the course of Earth's grand story. From mosses softening rock to trees shaping climates, from reefs anchoring ecosystems to humans facing choices today, the thread remains unbroken, reminding us that the quiet revolutions are often the ones that matter most. The Silurian is not a chapter that often makes its way into our common memory. It lacks the thunder of the dinosaurs, the dramatic spectacle of great extinctions, or the imposing presence of towering mammoth. And yet, without it, there would be no forests, no animals on land, no humans to wonder at the magnificent story of life. It was here, in this quiet age of shallow seas and fragile green shoots, that Earth first began its profound change from a barren world into the living planet we know today. The continents that had once been silent began to whisper with life, as mosses crept across stone and the first vascular plants reached for the light. Roots broke apart rock, patiently creating the first soils. Spores rode the wind, carrying the promise of green farther than ever before. In the oceans, reefs expanded into vast underwater cities, sheltering fish and invertebrates, stabilizing ecosystems in ways that still echo in our seas. And in those same waters, jaws emerged for the first time, rewriting the ancient rules of survival and setting the stage for predators that would one day dominate the world. All of these changes seemed small in their time, no more than quiet, tentative steps forward, but together they transformed the planet, subtly shifting the balance of the atmosphere, meticulously building the foundation of soil, and patiently preparing Earth for forests that would one day stretch from horizon to horizon. The Silurian was not loud, but it was permanent. It was not dramatic, but it was decisive. It gave us the green earth. When we walk through a forest today, hear bird song at dawn, or breathe in the air that sustains us, we're experiencing the indelible legacy of that forgotten age. The Silurian lives on in every leaf and blade of grass, in every patch of soil and drop of oxygen. It is the hidden architect of the living world, quietly shaping the conditions that made our existence possible. And it invites reflection. How many other chapters lie buried beneath our feet, written in stone and fossil, waiting patiently to be remembered? The Earth's story is not only about the great and the dramatic. It is also about the overlooked, the quiet revolutions that unfolded slowly but reshaped everything that followed. The Silurian reminds us that even the most modest beginnings can hold the profound power to transform the world. As we gently close this journey through deep time, one might softly wonder, which part of this forgotten age spoke to you most profoundly? Was it the fragile courage of the first plants taking root on barren rock, or the alien seas ruled by scorpion-like giants, or perhaps the vast, living reefs that built the first underwater cities bustling with silent life? Share your thoughts in the quiet space of the comments, and let us continue uncovering the mysteries of our planet together, weaving our curiosity into the vast tapestry of Earth's history. If you have enjoyed this gentle journey through time, do consider leaving a soft trace of your appreciation with a like, and perhaps joining our growing community by subscribing to the channel. Each new subscription helps this little corner of the internet grow, making it possible to continue exploring Earth's deepest and most hidden memories, shared in peace. A warm, silent thank you extends to those of you who are already part of this community. Your support keeps these long, quiet stories alive, drifting softly through the night. Tonight, as the Silurian drifts back into the mists of the past, remember that our vibrant world is built upon forgotten ages like this one. Without them, there would be no green earth, no towering forests to shelter life, no animals to walk the land, no humans to dream of the stars. Now let us carry this story with us as we close our eyes, drifting deeper into rest, and wonder what other forgotten chapters still lie hidden, waiting patiently to be uncovered in the silent, ancient heart of our home.